The moment I stepped into that hall, I signed my own death warrant. But I'd do it again. In the frozen wasteland of Frostreach, where alpha bloodlines rule with iron fists and omegas are less than livestock, servant girl Rhea Vance committed the unthinkable. She challenged King Draven Kale himself in front of his entire court. What happened next shattered a kingdom and ignited a bond that should never have existed. This is the story of how a nobody became everything, how fear turned to power, and how one defiant choice changed the rules forever. Stay until the end to see how it all unfolds. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The execution platform in Frostreach's main square had seen better days. Blood had seeped so deep into the wood that winter couldn't freeze it out anymore. Rhea Vance had scrubbed those boards 3 times this month alone, her hands raw and cracking in the cold, her knees bruised from kneeling. She knew every groove, every splinter, every dark stain that wouldn't come out no matter how hard she worked. She never imagined she'd be standing on it. But that was before today, before everything went to hell. Move! The guard's breath reeked of rotted meat and cheap ale. He shoved her forward, chains rattling at her wrists. The metal bit into her skin, already rubbed raw from the past 3 hours. Her bare feet, they'd taken her shoes, said she didn't deserve them, screamed against the frozen stone. The crowd pressed in from all sides. Merchants, farmers, lower nobles, all of them hungry for blood, for spectacle. They didn't care whose blood it was, just that it spilled. Whore! Omega filth! She dared touch him! The shouts blurred together. Rhea kept her eyes forward, kept her chin up even though every instinct screamed at her to curl into a ball and disappear. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. 24 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Just another servant in the sprawling stone warren of Frostreach Keep, one of dozens who scrubbed floors and emptied chamber pots and kept their eyes down when the nobles passed. She had a routine. Wake before dawn, fetch water from the well, light the fires in the great hall, prepare breakfast for the higher servants who'd prepare breakfast for the nobles who'd prepare breakfast for the king. She'd perfected the art of being nothing. But yesterday, everything changed. The mating trials. Every 5 years, Alpha King Draven Kale opened his court to eligible women from across the kingdom. Not because he wanted a mate. Everyone knew that. He'd rejected every woman presented to him for the past decade. But tradition demanded it. The bloodlines demanded it. And what the bloodlines demanded, the bloodlines got. Rhea's sister, Lena, had been dragged into it. 16 years old, terrified, and utterly unprepared. Lena was everything Rhea wasn't. Soft-spoken, gentle, still capable of hope. She believed in fairy tales, in happy endings, in the idea that maybe, just maybe, kindness mattered in this brutal place. She was wrong. When the guards came for her, Lena had been in the kitchens, helping Rhea knead bread. The head Omega of the keep had pointed her out with one gnarled finger. That one. She'll do. Do for what? Rhea had stepped between them and her sister. She's not eligible. She's not registered. You can't just... The guard backhanded her so hard she tasted copper. Watch your tongue, Omega. The king wants new blood in the trials. Your sister fits the requirements. She's a child. 6 to... Old enough. The guard grabbed Lena by the hair, yanked her forward. Lena whimpered, but didn't scream. She never screamed. Even when they hurt her, she took it quiet, like she'd been taught. Rhea screamed enough for both of them. You can't take her, please. She's not ready. She doesn't understand. Neither did the last 100 girls. The guard dragged Lena toward the door. Maybe this one will finally take. Maybe the king will actually accept a bond this time instead of... He didn't finish. Rhea threw herself at him, clawing at his face, his arms, anything she could reach. The other guards pulled her off, slammed her into the stone wall hard enough that stars burst across her vision. Lock her up, the head guard ordered. Let her cool down in the cells. But they didn't take her to the cells. They threw her in a storage closet and forgot about her. For 6 hours, Rhea pounded on that door until her fists bled. She screamed until her voice went hoarse. And when the door finally opened, not because someone remembered her, but because a young servant girl needed to fetch linens, Rhea didn't hesitate. She ran. The mating trials were held in the Hall of Ancients, the oldest part of the keep. Massive stone columns carved with the names of dead kings, dead warriors, dead alphas who'd built this kingdom on bones and blood. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into shadows. and the winter wind howled through cracks in the walls that were older than memory. Rhea had never been allowed inside. Servants used the side passages, the hidden corridors, the spaces between spaces where the real work happened and the nobles never looked. She knew every single one. She came in through the servants' entrance behind the dais where the king's throne sat, a monstrosity of iron and wolf pelts that looked more like a weapon than furniture. The hall was packed. Nobles in their furs and jewels lined both sides, gossiping behind their hands. Warriors stood at attention, hands on sword hilts, eyes scanning for threats. And in the center of it all, standing alone and small and shaking, was Lena. She wore a white dress, traditional for the trials, meant to symbolize purity. On her, it just looked like a shroud. Her dark hair hung loose down her back, and even from across the hall, Rhea could see her trembling. On the throne, slouched like he'd rather be anywhere else, sat King Draven Kyle. Rhea had seen him before, of course. Everyone in the keep had. He didn't hide away in some tower like the old king supposedly had. He walked the halls, inspected the guards, sometimes even ate in the main hall with his warriors instead of his private chambers. But she'd never been this close. Never seen the sharp angles of his face, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. Never noticed how his eyes, pale gray, like winter ice, seemed to look through people instead of at them. Never felt the weight of his presence, heavy and oppressive, like standing at the base of an avalanche waiting to fall. He was watching Lena with the same expression he'd probably watch a mud stain. Bored, irritated, already decided. The master of ceremonies droned on about bloodlines and tradition and the sacred bond between alpha and mate. No one was listening. They all knew how this ended, the same way it always ended. "Lena Vance," the master of ceremonies announced, his voice echoing off stone. "Approach the throne." Lena took one step forward, then another. She was crying, silent tears that dripped off her chin and left dark spots on the white dress. She looked up at the king, and Rhea saw the exact moment her sister's hope died. "Please," Lena whispered, so quiet most of the hall probably didn't hear. "Please, I'll serve you well. I'll be good. No." Draven's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Cold. Final. "You're dismissed," the crowd erupted. Some laughed. Others whispered excitedly, already composing the gossip they'd spread later. A few looked almost disappointed. No drama this time, just another quick rejection. Lena stood frozen. "But the bond ceremony hasn't—" "I said no." Draven leaned forward slightly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I don't want you. I don't want any of you. This entire circus is a waste of my time and yours. Go home." "Your Majesty." The master of ceremonies stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Tradition dictates that you must at least complete the bonding ritual before—" "Tradition," Draven said slowly, "can go to hell." Silence crashed through the hall. Even the nobles stopped whispering. The master of ceremonies went pale. "Your Majesty, the council insists—" "The council can insist all they want. I'm the king. My word is law." Draven stood, and the movement was casual, lazy even, but every warrior in the room tensed. "Remove her. Bring in the next one so I can reject her too, and we can all get on with our lives." That was when Rhea moved. She didn't plan it, didn't think about consequences or protocols or the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. She just pushed through the crowd, shoving nobles aside, ignoring their outraged shouts, and walked straight onto the sacred hall floor. "Don't you dare!" Her voice rang out clear and sharp. Every head turned. The master of ceremonies choked on his own tongue. The guards reached for their weapons, and Draven Kyle's eyes locked onto hers. For a moment, one impossible, eternal moment, the entire world narrowed to just the two of them. Rhea felt something slam into her chest. Not physical, but not physical either. Something that made her stumble back a step, even as her feet refused to retreat. Heat flooded through her despite the winter cold, racing up her spine and spreading through her limbs like wildfire. No, that was impossible. The bond snapped into place between them with enough force to steal the breath from her lungs. Not a gentle connection, not some romantic fairy tale nonsense. This was violent, consuming, undeniable. Like a hook buried in her sternum, yanking her forward. Draven went absolutely still. His eyes widened just slightly, the first real emotion she'd seen on his face. Shock. Then rage. "What?" he said very quietly, very dangerously. "Do you think you're doing?" Rhea couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The bond thrummed between them, insistent and awful, and she wanted to tear it out of her chest with her bare hands. But Lena was still standing there, still crying, still broken. So Rhea did the only thing she could do. She lifted her chin, met the king's eyes, and said the words that would change everything. "I challenge you." The hall exploded. Guards rushed forward. Nobles screamed. The master of ceremonies actually collapsed. Whether from shock or a heart attack, Rhea couldn't tell. But Rhea kept her eyes on Draven, on the king who'd just become her mate, whether either of them wanted it or not. "You heard me," she said, louder now, letting everyone hear. "I challenge you, Draven Kale. You sit up there on your throne, hiding behind rejection and fear, and you call yourself strong. You call yourself an alpha, but you're a coward." Someone grabbed her from behind. She didn't look away. "You're afraid," Rhea continued, and she could feel the bond twisting between them, feeding her his emotions whether he wanted her to have them or not. Rage, panic, and underneath it all, bone-deep terror. You're afraid of the bond, afraid of what it means. So you reject everyone who comes before you because rejecting them is easier than facing the truth. "Silence her," Draven commanded, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You're not a king," Rhea spat as the guards dragged her backward. "You're just a scared little boy playing dress-up." Draven moved faster than she'd thought possible. One moment he was on his throne, the next he was in front of her, the guards scattering out of his way. He grabbed her by the throat, not choking, but holding, his hand warm against her skin, and leaned in close enough that she could feel his breath. "You just signed your death warrant," he whispered. The bond pulsed between them, and for a split second, she felt what he felt, absolute terror wrapped around a core of something else, something that felt almost like longing. Then he shoved her away, turned to the guards, and said clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Take her to the cells. At dawn, she hangs for treason." They dragged her out of the hall as the nobles erupted into chaos. Rhea didn't resist, didn't struggle. She craned her neck, looking back toward where Lena still stood, and managed to catch her sister's eye. Lena was staring at her with horror and awe, and something that might have been gratitude. Worth it, Rhea thought, as they hauled her down into the dungeons. Even if she died tomorrow, it was worth it. She just didn't expect the dying to start so soon. Did she? The cells beneath Frostreach Keep were older than the keep itself. Carved straight into the mountain, they stayed cold year-round, a damp chill that seeped into your bones and never left. Rhea had delivered food to prisoners here a few times, always moving fast, never looking too close at what was in the cells. Now she was inside one. They'd thrown her in and left. No explanation, no trial, just chains and darkness and stone so cold it burned. The cell was barely big enough to lie down in, with a metal grate overhead that let in thin slants of gray light from somewhere above. Rhea pressed her back against the wall and tried to think. The bond. She could still feel it, that impossible connection threading between her and the king. It pulsed with his emotions, anger, fear, disgust, all of it slamming into her in waves. She didn't know how to block it out, didn't know if blocking it out was even possible. Every time she tried to push it away, it just came back stronger. This was wrong. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Bonds were supposed to be sacred, beautiful, the ultimate connection between Alpha and Omega. At least that's what the story said. This felt like drowning. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time did strange things in the dark. Rhea's stomach cramped with hunger, her mouth dry as sand, but neither bothered her as much as the growing ache in her chest. It started small, just a tightness, easy to ignore. But it spread, slowly and steadily, until breathing hurt, until her heart felt like it was being squeezed in a fist. The bond, she realized with growing horror. He was rejecting it, actively pushing against it, trying to sever it through sheer force of will, and it was killing her. She'd heard about this. Whispered stories from older Omegas, cautionary tales about what happened when an alpha rejected their true mate. The bond didn't just disappear. It rotted, turned toxic, poisoned both of them from the inside out. Usually, it took weeks, sometimes months. Draven was apparently trying to speed up the process. Rhea curled onto her side, arms wrapped around her ribs, and tried not to whimper. The pain was getting worse. Every pulse of rejection felt like a knife sliding between her ribs, slow and deliberate. She was going to die down here, not by hanging, by this. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Rhea didn't bother looking up, probably just a guard checking to make sure she hadn't escaped. A key scraped in the lock. The cell door creaked open. "Get up." Rhea recognized that voice. Karis, one of the senior guards. She'd always been decent to the servants, never cruel for cruelty's sake, but she wasn't kind either. Kindness got you killed in Frostreach. "Where?" Rhea managed. Her voice came out ragged, barely a whisper. "The king wants to see you." Of course he did. Probably wanted to watch her die up close. Karis hauled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. "Can you walk?" "Do I have a choice?" "No." They moved through the dungeon slowly. Rhea's legs trembled with every step, threatening to give out. The pain in her chest had spread to her limbs now, a dull ache that made everything harder. But as they climbed the stairs, got closer to the surface, the pain eased slightly. Not much. Just enough to breathe. The bond, she realized. They were getting closer to him. Proximity helped, which meant distance was literally killing her. Perfect. Karis led her not to the throne room or the great hall, but to a small chamber near the king's private quarters. A study, maybe, or a meeting room. Books lined the walls, and a fire crackled in the hearth, throwing dancing shadows across the stone floor. Draven stood with his back to the door, staring into the flames. He didn't turn when they entered. "Leave us," he said quietly. Karis hesitated. "Your Majesty, she's dangerous." "Leave." Karis left. The door closed with a soft click. Silence stretched between them. Rhea stayed where she was, swaying slightly, trying to stay upright. Every breath hurt. The bond thrummed with tension. "You're dying," Draven said finally, still not looking at her. "So are you." "I've been dying for years. This is nothing new." He did turn then, and Rhea saw what she'd missed in the throne room. He looked exhausted. Shadows under his eyes, lines around his mouth, the kind of weariness that came from years of not sleeping right. "But you... falling apart fast. Is that why you brought me here? To watch?" Something flickered across his face, almost like pain. "No." "Then why?" Draven moved to a table near the window, poured something from a crystal decanter into a glass. Amber liquid, probably whiskey. He drank it in one swallow, grimaced, poured another. "The bond," he said slowly, carefully, like the words were glass shards in his mouth. "You felt it, in the hall." "Hard to miss. True mates." He laughed, but it was hollow. "Do you know how rare that is? 1 in 1,000? 1 in 10,000? Most alphas and omegas never meet their true match. They settle for compatible bonds, arranged marriages, political alliances." "Lucky us," Rhea muttered. "There's no such thing as luck. Just fate, and fate is a cruel bastard." Joe Draven set the glass down too hard. It didn't shatter, but it should have. "I can't accept this bond. I figured that out when you sentenced me to death. I'm still going to sentence you to death. You broke sacred law. You interrupted a royal ceremony. You challenged the king in front of the entire court." His voice was flat, emotionless. "You have to die. There's no way around that." The pain in Rhea's chest spiked. She gasped, stumbled, caught herself against the wall. Draven flinched like he'd been hit. "But," he continued quietly, "I'll make it fast. Not the hanging. Something cleaner. You won't suffer." How generous. "It's more than you deserve." "Why?" Rhea pushed off the wall, forced herself to stand straight even though every instinct screamed to curl up and hide. "Why are you so afraid of this? Of me?" "You don't understand." "Then explain it." The words burst out of her, sharp and desperate. "You're the king. You're the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. You could have anyone, do anything, but instead you reject every woman who comes near you. And now you'd rather die than accept a true mate bond. Why?" Draven's jaw clenched. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, very quietly, "Because I've seen what bonds can become." He moved to the window, stared out at the frozen landscape beyond. My father had a true mate bond with my mother. It was everything the stories promised, powerful, passionate, unbreakable. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Until it wasn't. Rhea waited. The bond between them pulsed with his emotions, grief, rage, guilt. She died when I was 10, Draven continued, assassinated by a rival alpha family, poison in her wine. They thought killing her would weaken my father, make him easier to control. He turned back to face her, and his eyes were empty. They were right. He fell apart. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't rule. The bond ate him alive from the inside out. Within a year, he was dead. Not from poison, not from battle, from a broken heart. The words hung in the air between them. That's what bonds do, Draven said. They make you weak. They make you vulnerable. They give your enemies a weapon to use against you, and I swore, his voice cracked slightly, I swore I would never let that happen to me. Rhea understood now. The fear in the bond, the desperation behind the rejection. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of caring about her. So you'll just kill me instead, she said softly. End the bond before it can start. It's the only way. It's not. Rhea took a step forward. The bond flared between them, and she saw him flinch. You could... Don't. His voice turned sharp. Don't say it. Don't ask me to accept this, because I won't. I can't. Even if it kills us both? Better dead than weak. The words hit her like a slap. Rhea stared at him, this powerful king who was so terrified of love that he'd rather die alone than risk feeling something real. And she realized, with sudden horrible clarity, that he meant it. When? She asked. Dawn, like I said. Fine, Rhea turned toward the door. Her legs barely held her, but she made it 3 steps before Draven's voice stopped her. I'm sorry. She looked back. He was still standing by the window, silhouetted against the firelight, and for a moment he didn't look like a king at all. Just a man. Tired and scared and utterly alone. No, you're not, Rhea said. You're just afraid. Karis was waiting outside to take her back to the cell. As they descended the stairs, the pain came back full force, and Rhea had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. She had until dawn. That's what he'd said. At dawn she'd die. But as they threw her back into the cell and locked the door, as the darkness closed in around her again, Rhea made a decision. If she was going to die anyway, she might as well die doing something useful. She pressed her ear against the cell wall, listening to the sounds of the dungeon. Guards changing shifts, prisoners moaning, water dripping somewhere far off. And something else. Voices. Coming from deeper in the dungeons, from cells she hadn't seen when they brought her down. Rhea closed her eyes and focused on the bond. It was still there, still pulsing between her and Draven, still killing them both slowly. But it also gave her something else. A connection, a thread she could follow. And if she could feel his emotions through it, maybe she could push back. She didn't know if it would work, didn't know if she was strong enough. But she had nothing left to lose. So Rhea Vance, servant girl and Omega and condemned prisoner, sat in the darkness of her cell and began to pull on the bond between her and the king. Not to strengthen it, not to beg him to accept her, but to see what he was hiding. Because if Draven Kale was this afraid of a bond, there had to be a reason beyond his father's death. Something darker. Something he wasn't telling her. And Rhea had until dawn to figure out what it was. The bond resisted at first, like pushing through a wall of ice, hard and unyielding. But she kept pushing, kept pulling, kept dragging herself along that connection, even as the pain in her chest grew worse. Then, suddenly, it gave way. And Rhea fell into his memories. Memories weren't supposed to feel like this. Rhea had expected images, maybe sounds, fragments of the past laid out neat and orderly like pages in a book. What she got instead was chaos. Sensation and emotion and pain all tangled together, slamming into her with enough force to knock her backward against the cell wall. She gasped, pressed her palm against the cold stone, and tried to hold on as Draven's past consumed her. The first memory hit like a fist to the gut. She was young. No, he was young, maybe 12 or 13. Standing in a corridor lined with torches, their light throwing grotesque shadows on the walls. The The smell of blood hung thick in the air, metallic and wrong. A woman's scream echoed from somewhere close. Too close. "Mother!" Young Draven ran toward the sound, his boots slipping on stones slick with something dark. Guards tried to grab him, hold him back, but he fought them off with a strength that shouldn't have belonged to a child. He burst through a door, and the scene beyond stopped him cold. His mother lay on the floor, convulsing. Foam at her lips, eyes rolled back, fingers clawing at her throat. An advisor knelt beside her. Counselor Varen, Rhea recognized him even through the haze of memory. He was trying to help, or looked like he was trying to help, hands pressed to the queen's chest. "Poison," Varen said, looking up at the boy with something that might have been sympathy. "Someone poisoned her wine. There's nothing we can do." "No." Young Draven dropped to his knees beside his mother. The bond between his parents was visible even to him, a thread of light connecting her to wherever his father was. And as Rhea watched through Draven's eyes, she saw that thread start to fray. His mother's convulsions slowed, then stopped. Her eyes cleared for just a moment, focused on her son. "Run," she whispered. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "When you're king, trust no one." The thread snapped. Young Draven felt it like a physical blow, the severing of his parents' bond. Somewhere in the keep, his father screamed. The memory shifted, time compressing. Days or weeks or months, Rhea couldn't tell. Draven's father locked himself in his chambers, refused to eat, refused to see anyone. The bond's death was killing him slower than the poison had killed his wife, but just as surely. The kingdom began to fracture as rival families sensed weakness. "You have to do something." That was Varen again, standing in the king's chamber while Draven pressed his ear to the door outside. "The boy isn't ready. He's too young, too unstable. Let me help guide him." "The boy is my son," his father's voice weak and thready. "He'll be fine." "Will he? You've taught him that bonds are sacred, that true mates are gifts from fate. And now he's watched his mother die and seen what that bond did to you. What do you think he learned?" Silence. "Let me help him," Varen pressed. "Let me prepare him for what's coming. The kingdom needs a strong king, not a boy traumatized by love." "Get out!" But Varen didn't get out. Not really. He stayed close, always close, offering advice that sounded helpful but left Draven more confused, more afraid. The memory shifted again. Draven at 16 standing before his father's body. The king had finally stopped fighting, stopped trying to live without his mate. He'd simply given up. Laid down one night and didn't wake up. "It's the bond," Varen explained to the gathered court, his voice heavy with manufactured grief. "The bond killed him, as it kills all who submit to it. This is what happens when an alpha allows himself to be weakened by an omega." Rhea felt young Draven's rage spike, hot and sharp, but underneath it ran something colder, fear, because part of him wondered if Varen was right. The coronation came fast, too fast. Draven barely had time to grieve before they shoved a crown on his head and called him king. "The mating trials will begin next month," Varen announced, standing at the new king's side like a shadow. "Tradition demands it. You'll need to choose a mate, produce an heir." "I don't want a mate." "You don't have a choice. The bloodlines require, I'm the king. I'll decide what I require." But Varen was patient. He whispered in Draven's ear year after year, reinforcing every fear, twisting every doubt. Bonds are weakness. Omegas are weapons. Love is the fastest path to death. And slowly, carefully, Varen became the most powerful man in the kingdom. Not through force or title, but through the young king's dependence on his counsel. The memories came faster now, a blur of rejected mates and closed-door meetings. Rhea caught glimpses of women brought before the throne, some hopeful, some terrified, all of them eventually dismissed. She felt Draven's relief each time the bond didn't form, each time he remained free. Until yesterday. Until her. The memory of their bond snapping into place hit Rhea from Draven's perspective, and it was so much worse than her own experience. She'd felt the hook in her chest, the undeniable pull. But for him, it was like every fear he'd ever had manifesting at once. The bond was everything Varen had warned him about. Powerful, overwhelming, impossible to resist. And it terrified him. Rhea surfaced from the memories gasping, her own body again, her own mind. The cells spun around her. She pressed her forehead to the cold stone and tried to breathe through the nausea. Varen. It all came back to Varen. That advisor had been in every memory, every pivotal moment. Always there, always whispering, always guiding Draven toward fear and isolation. Rhea had seen him around the keep, of course. He was hard to miss, tall and thin, with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He sat on the king's council, advised on matters of state, and everyone treated him with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. She'd never questioned it before, never thought to. But now, with Draven's memories fresh in her mind, she saw the pattern. Varen hadn't just manipulated the king. He'd spent 20 years positioning himself as the true power behind the throne, using Draven's trauma and fear to control him. And if Rhea died at dawn, that control would remain absolute. Footsteps in the corridor jerked her back to the present. She scrambled to her feet, or tried to. Her legs gave out halfway, and she caught herself against the wall. The pain in her chest had gotten worse. Much worse. Every breath felt like sucking air through a straw. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. A key turned in the lock. Rhea expected Karis or maybe one of the other guards. What she got instead was a woman in servant's clothing, hood pulled low over her face. "Don't make a sound," the woman whispered. She slipped into the cell, pulled back her hood. "Lena." "What are you doing here?" Rhea hissed. "If they catch you—" "They won't. I traded shifts with Mari, told her I'd cover the laundry if she covered my kitchen duty. No one notices servants." Lena knelt beside her sister, and up close Rhea could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy. "I had to see you, had to. I'm so sorry." "For what? This is my fault. If I'd been stronger, if I'd stood up to them." "Stop." Rhea grabbed her sister's hand. "You did nothing wrong. This isn't on you. You're going to die because of me. I'm going to die because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. That's a me problem, not a you problem." Rhea tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "How are you? Did they hurt you after I interrupted?" "No. They just sent me home, told me I was dismissed from the trials permanently." Lena's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But Rhea, something's wrong. The king, he's been acting strange. I heard some of the guards talking. They said he collapsed right after they took you away. Said he was bleeding from his nose and couldn't stand up straight." The bond. He was fighting it so hard it was destroying him too. "Listen to me." Rhea squeezed her sister's hand. "I need you to do something for me. It's dangerous and you'll probably say no, but I'm asking anyway." "Anything." "Find Counselor Varen. Watch him. See who he talks to, where he goes, what he does when he thinks no one's looking." Lena blinked. "Why?" "Because I think he's been controlling the king for years, and I think he's the reason Draven is so afraid of bonds." Rhea pulled herself up straighter, ignoring the spike of pain. "I saw his memories, Lena, through the bond. Varen was there when Draven's mother died, there when his father wasted away, there for every rejected mate trial. He's been whispering poison in the king's ear since he was a boy." That's treason. You're talking about treason." "I'm talking about the truth." Rhea met her sister's eyes. "And if I'm right, if Varen has been manipulating everything, then Draven isn't the monster everyone thinks he is. He's just scared. And Varen's been making sure he stays that way." Lena chewed her bottom lip, a habit she'd had since childhood. "Even if you're right, what does it matter? You'll be dead by dawn." "Maybe. Probably. But you won't be. And someone needs to know what I found out." Rhea's voice cracked slightly. "Please, Lena, I know I'm asking a lot, but I'll do it." Lena's voice was steadier than Rhea had ever heard it. "I'll watch him. And if I find something, I don't know what I'll do, but I'll figure it out." "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, both knowing this was probably goodbye. "I have to go," Lena finally whispered. "The shift change is in 10 minutes. If I'm not back before then—" "Go. Be careful." Lena stood, pulled her hood back up. At the cell door, she paused. "I love you." "Love you too." Rhea's throat felt tight. "Now get out of here before you get caught." The door closed with a soft click. The lock turned. Footsteps faded down the corridor, and Rhea was alone again. She slumped back against the wall, exhausted. The bond pulsed weakly in her chest, barely there now. Draven must still be fighting it, pushing it away with everything he had, which meant they were both running out of time. Rhea closed her eyes and tried to think. She had maybe 5 hours until dawn. 5 hours to figure out how to expose Varen, save herself, and somehow convince a terrified king to accept a bond he'd spent his entire life avoiding. The odds weren't great, but she'd faced worse odds before. Growing up as a servant in Frostreach taught you to survive on scraps and hope. You learned to notice things others missed, to move through spaces without being seen, to piece together information from overheard conversations and stolen glances. Rhea had been invisible her whole life. Maybe it was time to use that. She pressed her palm against the bond, felt its weak pulse. Draven was close, somewhere in the keep, probably in his chambers. She could almost sense his location through the connection, like a compass pointing north. If she focused hard enough, maybe she could push through again. Not into his memories this time, but into his present. See what he was seeing, hear what he was hearing. It was a long shot, probably impossible. The bond was barely holding together as it was. But Rhea had run out of options. She took a slow breath, ignored the pain in her chest, and pushed. The cell disappeared. She was standing in a room she didn't recognize. No, that wasn't right. She was seeing through Draven's eyes, standing in his chambers. The room was smaller than she'd expected, almost sparse. A bed, a desk, bookshelves lining the walls, a window that looked out over the frozen courtyard, and Varen standing by that window, talking. "Can't let this continue," Varen was saying. His voice was smooth, almost soothing. "The bond is killing you. I can see it. Everyone can see it. You collapsed in the throne room, Draven. You're bleeding from places you shouldn't bleed from. This Omega is destroying you." "She's not." Draven's voice, hoarse and weak. Rhea felt his exhaustion like it was her own. "It's the rejection that's killing us. If I just accepted what? A bond that would make you weak? That would give your enemies exactly what they need to destroy you?" Varen moved closer, placed a hand on Draven's shoulder. "Your father accepted his bond. Look what happened to him. My father died because someone poisoned my mother. And who do you think ordered that poison?" Varen's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "It was the Talvern family. They knew your father was strong, knew they couldn't beat him in open combat. So they found his weakness, his mate, and they exploited it." Rhea felt Draven flinch. "If you accept this bond with the Omega," Varen continued, "you're painting a target on her back, and on yours. Every family that wants your throne will know exactly how to get it. They'll come for her, and when she dies, you'll die too, just like your father." "Then what do you suggest?" Draven's voice was hollow. "Let her hang? Let us both die slowly?" "Let me handle it." Varen's tone shifted, became almost gentle. "I'll make it quick. Painless. She won't suffer. And once she's gone, the bond will fade. You'll be free again." "Free," Draven repeated. The words sounded bitter in his mouth. "Yes. Free to rule without weakness. Free to be the king your father should have been." Varen squeezed his shoulder. "Trust me. I've guided you this far. I won't lead you wrong now." Rhea felt something shift in Draven. Not agreement, but resignation. He was giving up. Letting Varen take control because it was easier than fighting. "No." She pushed against the bond, tried to make him feel her presence, tried to scream across the connection that Varen was lying, that he'd been lying for years, that everything he'd told Draven about bonds and weakness was poison designed to keep him isolated and afraid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Draven stiffened. His hand went to his chest, pressing against where the bond sat. "What is it?" Varen asked sharply. "I feel she's here. Not physically, but..." Draven turned, scanning the room like he could see her. "She's watching." "Impossible. She's locked in the dungeons." "I'm telling you, she's..." Draven's eyes widened. "She's in my head, through the bond." Varen's expression flickered, just for a second, but Rhea saw it. Panic. Quickly masked, but there. "That's not possible," Varen said firmly. Bonds don't work that way. You're hallucinating from the strain. I'm not hallucinating. She's here. Draven's voice grew stronger. Rhea, if you can hear me. Rhea pushed harder, threw everything she had at the bond. Not words. She didn't know how to form words through this connection, but emotion, urgency, warning. The memory she'd seen flashed between them, Varen standing over the dead queen, Varen whispering in young Draven's ear, Varen always there, always controlling. Draven gasped, stumbled backward. What did you see? Varen moved toward him. What did she show you? You. Draven's voice shook. I saw you. The night my mother died, you were... He stopped, face going pale. You were the only one with her when she drank the wine. Draven, you're not thinking clearly. You were the only one. Draven's eyes locked onto Varen. Everyone else arrived after she started convulsing, but you were already there, already kneeling beside her. Because I heard her scream. I came running. Or you were already there because you gave her the poison. The words came out flat, certain. It was you. It was you all along. Silence crashed through the room. Then Varen smiled, slow and cold and utterly without warmth. Clever girl, he said softly. Not to Draven, to Rhea, somehow knowing she was watching. I should have killed you immediately instead of letting the boy do it. Draven moved fast, grabbed Varen by the throat, slammed him against the wall. You killed my mother. I freed your father. Varen didn't struggle, didn't even look concerned. That bond was making him weak, making him soft. He was negotiating with enemies instead of crushing them, showing mercy instead of strength. Your mother's influence was destroying everything your grandfather built. So you murdered her. So I removed an obstacle. Varen's smile widened. And when your father proved too broken to rule effectively, I stepped in. I guided you, shaped you, made you into the king you are today. Everything you've accomplished, you owe to me. Draven's hand tightened. I owe you nothing. Don't you? Varen's eyes were bright, almost manic. Who taught you that bonds are weakness? Who convinced you to reject every mate that came before you? Who made sure you stayed isolated and afraid, so desperate for guidance that you do whatever I suggested? The words hung in the air like a noose. I've been ruling this kingdom through you for 20 years, Varen whispered. You're a puppet boy, a well-trained, obedient puppet. And if you kill me, you'll have no idea what to do next. You'll fall apart just like your father did. Rhea felt Draven's rage spike through the bond, hot and overwhelming. His hand trembled against Varen's throat. For a moment, she thought he might actually do it, might crush the man's windpipe and damn the consequences. Then the door burst open. Guards poured in, weapons drawn. Your Majesty, we heard shouting. Varen moved like a snake. He twisted out of Draven's grip, stumbled backward, clutching his throat. The king has gone mad, he gasped. The bond has poisoned his mind. He tried to kill me. That's a lie, Draven snarled. Look at him. Varen pointed at Draven with a shaking hand. Look at his eyes. The bond is destroying him, just like it destroyed his father. He's not fit to rule. The guards hesitated, looking between their king and his most trusted advisor. He killed my mother, Draven said, his voice deadly calm. He poisoned her 20 years ago, and he's been manipulating me ever since. Can you prove that? Varen straightened, his voice regaining its authority. Or is this just the paranoid delusion of a king driven mad by a bond he's too weak to reject properly? More guards arrived, then nobles drawn by the commotion, the room filled with people, all of them watching, whispering. The king has lost his mind, Varen announced to the crowd. The Omega's bond has corrupted him. For the safety of the kingdom, I'm calling an emergency council meeting. Until the king's fitness to rule can be determined, I'm assuming temporary authority. You can't do that, Draven growled. I just did. Guards, escort the king to his chambers, for his own protection. Varen's smile was back, cold and victorious. And someone fetch the Omega from the dungeons. If she's causing this through the bond, we'll need to sever it permanently, immediately. The guards moved toward Draven. He backed away, hand going to his sword. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Varen said softly. You know you can't fight them all. And if you try, I'll have no choice but to declare you unfit and have you removed from the throne entirely. Rhea felt Draven's desperation through the bond. He was trapped. If he fought, he'd prove Varen's claims that the bond had driven him mad. If he submitted, Varen would have her killed, and Draven would be powerless to stop it. She had to do something. The connection between them thrummed, weak but present. Rhea focused on it, gathered every scrap of strength she had left, and pushed one final image through the bond. Not a memory, a plan. Draven's eyes widened slightly. Then, so quick she almost missed it, he nodded. Fine, he said, letting his sword hand drop. I'll go to my chambers, but the Omega stays in the dungeons until the council meets. No execution until this is resolved officially. Agreed, Varen said smoothly. We'll handle this properly, by law and tradition. The guards surrounded Draven, led him from the room. Varen watched him go, that cold smile still on his face. Then he turned and looked directly at where Rhea was watching through the bond. Enjoy your last few hours, he whispered. I'm going to make sure you disappear before anyone can hear what you know. The connection snapped. Rhea slammed back into her body so hard she screamed. The pain was instant and overwhelming. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. Her head pounded. Her limbs shook. But she'd done it. She'd reached Draven, and he'd understood. Now she just had to survive long enough for the plan to work. Footsteps echoed in the corridor again. Fast this time. Urgent. The cell door crashed open. Not Karis. Not Lena. Varen, flanked by two guards Rhea didn't recognize. Their faces were scarred, their eyes cold. Not regular keep guards. Mercenaries. Bring her, Varen ordered. They grabbed her before she could even try to resist, hauled her out of the cell, down the corridor, deeper into the dungeons where the torchlight didn't reach and the screaming never stopped. Where are you taking me? Rhea's voice came out weak, barely audible. Somewhere no one will find you, Varen said pleasantly. Not until it's far too late. They dragged her into a chamber that smelled of old death and newer blood. Chains hung from the ceiling. Instruments lined the walls, tools designed for one purpose only: torture. I don't have time for subtlety, Varen said, rolling up his sleeves, so I'll make this simple. You've been telling the king lies about me, poisoning his mind through that cursed bond. I need to know exactly what you told him and how to undo it. I showed him the truth, Rhea managed, that you killed his mother, that you've been controlling him for years. The truth, Varen laughed. The truth is I saved this kingdom. Draven's parents would have run it into the ground with their weakness and sentiment. I did what needed to be done. You're a murderer. I'm a pragmatist. He selected a blade from the wall, tested its edge against his thumb. And now I'm going to be practical about removing an obstacle. The king will mourn you, of course, claim it was the bond severing that killed you. But he'll survive, and he'll learn finally that I was right all along. He moved toward her, blade gleaming in the dim light. Rhea's mind raced. The plan. She just had to hold on long enough for the plan. You made a mistake, she said, forcing her voice steady. Oh? And what's that? You let me see your fear. Rhea met his eyes. When Draven said I was watching through the bond, you panicked, just for a second, because you knew if I could show him memories, I could show him everything, every lie you've told, every manipulation, every murder. Varen's expression flickered. Even if that were true, you're about to die. Whatever you showed him dies with you. Does it? Rhea smiled, even though it hurt. You sure about that? Because bonds work both ways, Varen, and if I can push memories to him... She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Varen's eyes widened in understanding. Then rage. Kill her, he snapped at the guards. Now, before... The chamber door exploded inward. Draven stood in the doorway, sword drawn, eyes blazing. Behind him, a dozen guards, real ones this time, loyal ones, poured in. Step away from her, Draven said quietly. Varen didn't move. You're making a mistake. No, I'm fixing one. Draven advanced into the room. You're under arrest for the murder of Queen Alara Kael, conspiracy against the crown, and treason. You will stand trial before the full council. With what proof? The delusions of a dying Omega? Varen gestured at Rhea. Look at her. The bond is killing her. Anything she showed you through that connection is unreliable at best. Then we'll verify it. Draven's voice was steel. We'll bring in every servant who was on duty the night my mother died. We'll search your chambers. We'll follow every thread until we find the truth. He paused. "Unless you'd like to confess now and save us all the trouble." For a long moment, Varen just stared at him. Then slowly, he smiled. "You really think you can rule without me? You're still that scared little boy, Draven, still terrified of bonds and weakness and feeling anything real. I made you what you are. Without me, you're nothing." "Maybe." Draven's expression didn't change. "But I'd rather be nothing than your puppet." He nodded to the guards. They moved forward, grabbed Varen, dragged him toward the door. "This isn't over!" Varen shouted as they hauled him away. "You need me! The kingdom needs me! You'll see! You'll—" The door slammed shut, cutting off his voice. Silence fell over the chamber. Then Draven's knees gave out. He caught himself against the wall, breathing hard, blood trickling from his nose. The bond. It was killing him too. "Rhea," he gasped. "I'm sorry. I'm so—" "Save it." She tried to stand, couldn't. "Just get me out of these chains." He moved to her, hands shaking as he worked the locks. The moment the chains fell away, Rhea collapsed forward. Draven caught her, lowered them both to the ground. "The bond," he said quietly. "I have to accept it. It's the only way to save us both." "I know. But if I do, if we complete it—" His voice cracked. "I'm terrified, Rhea. Terrified of what it means. Terrified of caring about someone enough that losing them would destroy me. Then we'll be terrified together." Rhea reached up, touched his face. "But at least we'll be alive." Draven closed his eyes. She felt his fear through the bond, sharp and overwhelming. But underneath it, something else. Hope. Fragile and new, but there. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." He leaned down, pressed his forehead to hers, and accepted the bond. The world exploded. The pain vanished first. That crushing weight in her chest, the feeling of being slowly torn apart from the inside, gone in an instant. Then came the opposite sensation, a rush of warmth and power that flooded through her veins like liquid fire. Rhea gasped, arching against Draven as the bond clicked into place. Not the broken, dying thing it had been before, but something complete, solid, real. She could feel him. Not just his emotions anymore, but everything. His heartbeat syncing with hers. His breath matching her rhythm. His fear and hope and desperate relief all tangled together until she couldn't tell where he ended and she began. "Is it supposed to feel like this?" she managed. "I don't know." Draven's voice was rough. I never let it get this far before." They stayed like that for a moment, foreheads pressed together, both of them shaking. The bond hummed between them, strong and steady, and for the first time since this nightmare started, Rhea felt like she could actually breathe. Then reality crashed back in. "We need to move," Draven said, pulling back. He stood, offered her his hand. "Varen has allies, loyalists. They'll try to free him the moment they realize what's happened." Rhea let him pull her up. Her legs were steadier now, the bond's completion having healed whatever damage the rejection had done. "How many allies are we talking about?" "Too many." Draven's jaw clenched. "He's been in power for 2 decades. Half the council owes their positions to him. The other half fears him. And now we've arrested him for murder based on visions from a bond most of them think is an abomination." Rhea leaned against the wall, mind racing. "They're going to call us liars, say we fabricated everything." "Probably. So what's the plan?" Draven was quiet for a moment, then, "We prove it. Find evidence. Something concrete that even Varen's supporters can't deny." "His chambers," Rhea said suddenly. "You said you'd search his chambers. If he kept records, correspondence, anything that connects him to your mother's murder, he's too smart for that. He wouldn't keep evidence lying around." "Maybe not lying around, but everyone keeps secrets. Everyone has something they think is hidden well enough." Rhea pushed off the wall. "We search anyway. It's better than nothing." They made it out of the torture chamber and back through the dungeons without incident. The guards Draven had brought stood watch outside, their expressions carefully neutral. They'd just watched their king arrest his most trusted advisor, watched him accept a bond with an Omega prisoner, watched the entire political structure of Frostreach crack down the middle, and now they had to choose which side of that crack to stand on. "Commander Tallis," Draven addressed the oldest guard, I need you to secure Varen's chambers. No one in or out until I arrive. And get me Counselor Marin. She's the only one on that council I trust not to be in Varen's pocket. Your Majesty. Talus saluted, but his eyes flickered to Rhea. What about the Omega? The court will expect... The Omega has a name, Draven said quietly, and she's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. Talus paled slightly. Understood, Your Majesty. They climbed the stairs from the dungeons into the main keep. Dawn was breaking outside, gray light filtering through the narrow windows. Servants were starting their morning routines, carrying water and lighting fires. They stopped when they saw Draven and Rhea, stared openly. Word was going to spread fast. Let them stare, Draven muttered, feeling her discomfort through the bond. By noon, everyone in the kingdom will know what happened. That's what I'm afraid of. They reached Varen's chambers on the 3rd floor of the keep's west wing. The door was already guarded, 2 warriors standing at attention. They stepped aside as Draven approached, eyes carefully averted. The chambers were exactly what Rhea expected, opulent, carefully organized, everything in its place. Rich carpets covered the stone floor. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive desk dominated one corner, its surface clear except for an inkwell and a single quill. Too clean. Too perfect. Start with the desk, Draven ordered. He moved to the bookshelves, began pulling volumes down, checking behind them. Look for hidden compartments, false bottoms, anything that feels wrong. Rhea went to the desk, started opening drawers. Letters, mostly. Correspondence with other nobles, trade agreements, supply requisitions. All of it perfectly mundane. She checked under the drawers, felt along the sides for hidden catches. Nothing. Draven, a woman's voice from the doorway. What in all hells is going on? Rhea turned to see a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing counselor's robes. Marin, presumably. She looked furious. Varen killed my mother, Draven said without preamble. I'm searching for proof. Marin went very still. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. The Omega showed me through the bond. Varen was there the night she died. He gave her the poison. A vision through a bond isn't proof, Draven. You know that. Marin stepped into the room, closed the door behind her. The council will never accept it. They'll say you've been compromised, that the bond has clouded your judgment. Then help me find something they will accept. Draven pulled another book down, threw it aside when nothing fell out. There has to be something. He's been manipulating this kingdom for 20 years. He can't have hidden everything perfectly. Marin looked at Rhea. You're the servant girl, the one who interrupted the trials. That's me. Rhea kept searching the desk. And before you ask, yes, the bond is real. Yes, I saw what I saw. And yes, Varen tried to have me killed about 20 minutes ago to keep it quiet. He what? Took me to a torture chamber, was about to bleed me out. Draven stopped him. Rhea found another drawer, this one locked. You got something to pick this with? Marin pulled a thin piece of metal from her hair. Not a hairpin, something more specialized. She handed it to Rhea. I don't like Varen. Never have. He's too smooth, too controlled. But murder? He admitted it, Draven said, down in the dungeons. Told me he killed her to save the kingdom from her weakness. Of course he'd admit it when he thought no one else could hear. Marin's voice was bitter. The bastard probably enjoyed confessing. Rhea worked the lock, felt it click. The drawer slid open. Inside was more correspondence. These letters older, the paper yellowed with age. She pulled them out, started reading. Most of it was boring administrative stuff, but one letter tucked at the bottom made her pause. Draven, look at this. He crossed to her, read over her shoulder. The letter was dated 20 years ago, just 2 months before the Queen's death. It was from someone named Lord Talvern, and the contents were careful, coded, but clear enough if you knew what you were looking for. The matter we discussed proceeds as planned. The shipment will arrive on schedule. Ensure your man is in position. Talvern, Draven breathed. Varen always said it was the Talvern family who ordered the poison. He blamed them for everything. Convenient, Rhea said. Blame a rival family, unite the kingdom against them, take power in the chaos. She kept reading. This letter proves Varen was working with Talvern. not against him. Merrin took the letter, examined it closely. This is Talvern's seal, his handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. She looked up at Draven. This is proof of conspiracy, but it doesn't prove Varen administered the poison himself. It proves he was working with the people who did. Draven's hands clenched. That's enough for me. It won't be enough for the council. Not all of them. Merrin set the letter down. Varen has been grooming his supporters for years. They'll fight this. Call it forgery, circumstantial evidence, anything to protect him. Then what do you suggest? Rhea asked. We just let him go? Pretend none of this happened? No. We call a full council meeting, present the evidence, force them to take a position publicly. Merrin's expression hardened. Some will stand with Varen, but some won't. And once we expose the conspiracy, the ones who do stand with him mark themselves as traitors. That's a civil war, Draven said quietly. It's already a civil war, you just haven't admitted it yet. Merrin moved to the door. I'll send word to the council. We meet in 1 hour. That gives you time to prepare your case and to prepare for what comes next. She left. The room felt colder without her presence. Rhea kept searching the desk while Draven went back to the bookshelves. They worked in silence, both of them aware that the clock was ticking. 1 hour until the council meeting. 1 hour to find enough evidence to damn a man who'd spent 2 decades covering his tracks. The bond pulsed between them, steady and strong. Rhea could feel Draven's determination, his rage, his fear, and underneath it all, something new. A fierce protectiveness directed entirely at her. It should have felt stifling. Instead, it felt like armor. Here. Draven's voice was tight. He'd found a loose stone in the wall behind one of the bookshelves. Behind it, a small cavity, and inside that cavity, a locked box. He brought it to the desk, smashed the lock with the pommel of his dagger. The box opened. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all in Varen's handwriting. Correspondence with nobles across the kingdom, carefully outlining his plans. How he'd positioned his people. Who owed him favors. Who could be blackmailed. Who needed to be eliminated. And at the bottom, a journal. Leather-bound, pages filled with Varen's neat script. Draven opened it, started reading. His face went from pale to white. What? Rhea moved beside him, looked at the page. It was dated 20 years ago, the night of the Queen's death. The poison worked perfectly, Varen had written. Alara is dead. The king is broken. Young Draven watched it all. Good. He needs to understand what bonds cost, what weakness brings. By the time he's of age, he'll be so afraid of feeling anything that controlling him will be simple. The kingdom will be mine in everything but name. Rhea felt sick. He planned it all, Draven whispered. From the beginning. My mother's death. My father's breakdown. Everything. His hand shook as he turned pages, reading more. He killed them both. Not quickly. Slowly. Deliberately. To shape me into something he could control. The bond flared with his rage, so hot and sharp that Rhea gasped. We have him, she managed. This is confession in his own handwriting. No one can deny this. They'll try. Draven closed the journal, held it like it was made of glass. But you're right, this is enough. It has to be enough. A commotion in the hallway made them both turn, shouting, the clash of steel on steel. Then the door burst open. Commander Talus stood there, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Your Majesty, we're under attack. Varen's loyalists have seized the North Tower and the main gate. They're demanding his release. Draven was moving before Talus finished speaking. How many? At least 50, maybe more. They're heavily armed, and they have hostages. Who? Talus's expression went grim. The servants' quarters. They've locked down the entire section. Anyone who is sleeping there is trapped. Rhea's blood went cold. Lena, my sister was in the servants' quarters. We're getting them out. Draven's voice was steel. He grabbed the journal and letters, shoved them into a satchel. Talus, get these to Counselor Merrin. Tell her to start the meeting without me. Present everything we found. Where will you be? Ending this, Draven buckled his sword belt, checked his blade. Then he looked at Rhea. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Talus. Absolutely not. Rhea moved to follow him. My sister is in there. I'm coming. You're not trained. You'll get yourself killed. I've survived this long, haven't I? Rhea grabbed a dagger from Varen's desk. It was ornamental, probably dull, but it was better than nothing. Besides, you'll be able to feel through the bond if I'm in trouble. You can keep me safe. That's not how... Draven stopped, clearly warring with himself. The bond thrummed with his conflict. Fine, but you stay behind me. You don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Understood? Understood. They ran through the keep's corridors, gathering loyal guards as they went. By the time they reached the servants' quarters, they had maybe 20 warriors, not enough to storm the position, but enough to make a statement. The North Tower loomed above them, its entrance barricaded. Rhea could see figures moving in the windows, weapons glinting. "Let me through!" a familiar voice shouted from inside. "I'm not part of this! Let me out!" Lena. Rhea took a step forward. Draven's hand shot out, held her back. "Not yet," he murmured. "Wait." A man appeared at the barricade. Rhea recognized him. Lord Corvin, one of the younger nobles, always hovering around Varen during council meetings. His face was flushed, eyes wild. "King Draven!" he shouted. "Release Councillor Varen immediately, or the servants die." "Varen is a traitor and a murderer," Draven called back. "Release the hostages and surrender. You'll be treated with mercy." "Mercy?" Corvin laughed, high and sharp. "Like the mercy you showed Varen? Like the mercy you showed tradition when you accepted a bond with an Omega nobody?" He spat over the barricade. "You're not fit to rule. You've let that creature corrupt you." The bond flared with Draven's anger. Rhea felt it like a physical blow, hot and violent. "Last chance," Draven said, his voice deadly quiet. "Release them." "No." Corvin raised a crossbow. "But I'll release one. As a demonstration." He aimed at the window where Lena's voice had come from. Fired. Rhea screamed. The bolt struck something, not Lena, but close enough that she heard her sister shriek. "Stop!" Rhea pushed forward, past Draven's restraining hand. "Stop! I'll trade myself. Let them go. Take me instead." "Rhea, no!" Draven grabbed her arm. "They want me, right? The Omega who corrupted their king?" She looked up at Corvin. "I'll come up there, willingly. Just let the servants go." Corvin's eyes gleamed. "All of you heard that. The creature offers herself. King Draven, will you allow it? Or will you sacrifice innocence to protect your whore?" The bond twisted with Draven's agony. She felt his desperation, his rage, his absolute terror at the thought of letting her go up there. "Trust me," she whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "I have an idea. It's suicide. It's a chance." She squeezed his hand. Through the bond, she pushed a feeling, not words, but intention, hope, a plan half-formed. Draven's jaw clenched. Then, slowly, he nodded. "She goes up," he called, "but the servants come down first. All of them. Then she comes to you." "No, she comes up, then they leave. We need insurance." "Not happening. You get nothing until I see every servant walk out of that tower alive." A tense silence. Corvin conferred with someone behind the barricade. Finally, "Fine. But if any of your guards try anything, we kill her immediately." "Understood." The barricade shifted. The door opened. Servants started filing out, terrified, some of them crying. Rhea scanned each face, looking for Lena. There, near the end. Her sister stumbled out, eyes finding Rhea immediately. "No," Lena whispered. "Don't do this." "Get behind the guards," Rhea said. "Go, now." Lena opened her mouth to argue. Rhea shook her head once, sharp. Her sister's face crumpled, but she obeyed, running to where the loyal guard stood. The last servant exited. The door stayed open, waiting. Rhea started forward. Each step felt wrong, every instinct screaming at her to run the other direction. But she kept walking, kept moving toward that door. The bond thrummed. She felt Draven right there with her, his presence solid and real despite the physical distance. "Whatever you're planning," he murmured through the bond. She didn't know how she heard him, didn't understand how the connection worked, but his voice was clear as if he'd spoken aloud. "Make it fast. I can't hold back much longer." She reached the door, crossed the threshold. The barricade slammed shut behind her. Hands grabbed her, rough and angry. They dragged her up the stairs through corridors she'd cleaned 100 times. The tower was packed with armed men, maybe 60 or 70 of them, all loyal to Varen, all willing to kill for him. They threw her into the main chamber at the tower's peak. Corvin stood by the window, crossbow still in hand. Others surrounded her, weapons drawn. "The Omega," Corvin said, circling her like a predator. "The creature who bewitched our king, who corrupted him with forbidden bonds and lies." "I didn't bewitch anyone," Rhea managed. "The bond happened. Neither of us wanted it." "Then you should have done the honorable thing and refused it. Killed yourself rather than drag a king into weakness." Corvin grabbed her hair, yanked her head back. "But you didn't. You seduced him, used the bond to poison his mind against Counselor Varen. Varen murdered the queen. I have proof. The whole council will see it." "Proof? You mean lies whispered through a bond?" Corvin's grip tightened. "We'll sever that bond, cut it out of you. And once you're dead, the king will see clearly again." He raised a blade. Rhea didn't think, just acted. She dropped her weight, twisted, drove the ornamental dagger she'd taken from Varen's desk up into Corvin's gut. It wasn't sharp enough to kill, but it was sharp enough to hurt. Corvin screamed, stumbled back. His men rushed forward, and Rhea did what she'd planned from the moment she offered herself. She ran to the window, climbed onto the ledge, and stood facing the courtyard far below. "Stop!" she shouted. "Stop, or I jump!" They froze. Corvin, clutching his stomach, stared at her with fury and confusion. "You're bluffing," he gasped. "Am I?" Rhea looked down. The courtyard was maybe 50 feet below, high enough to kill, high enough to destroy the bond if she died. "Draven can feel everything I feel through this connection. If I die, he'll know it instantly. He'll know you murdered me, and then he'll burn this tower to the ground with all of you inside. You won't do it." But Corvin sounded uncertain. Rhea smiled, stepped back slightly, letting her heel hang over open air. Through the bond, she felt Draven's absolute panic, felt him running, climbing, trying to reach her. "You want to find out?" she asked. The men looked at each other, looked at Corvin. The wound in his stomach was bleeding badly, his face going pale. "She's insane," someone whispered. "No," Rhea said. "I'm just done playing by your rules." She could feel Draven getting closer, could sense his desperation, almost there, just a few more seconds. "Kill her," Corvin ordered. "Kill her now, before—" The door exploded inward. Draven and his guards poured through, weapons drawn. The fight was brutal and fast. Varen's men fought hard, but they were cornered, trapped in a space with no escape. Rhea stayed on the ledge, balanced on the edge, until Draven reached her. He pulled her down, into his arms, and the relief that flooded through the bond was so strong it made her dizzy. "Don't ever do that again," he rasped. "No promises." The fight ended quickly after that. Corvin was captured, bleeding but alive. His men surrendered or died. It should have been over. But when they dragged the survivors down to the courtyard, when they gathered the evidence and prepared to present it to the council, Rhea saw something that made her blood freeze. The keep's main gates were open, and through them poured soldiers, not Frostreach guards, not Varen's personal loyalists, an army. Hundreds of warriors in unfamiliar colors, bearing standards Rhea didn't recognize. "The Talvern forces," Talus breathed. "They've come." Draven's hand tightened on his sword. "How many?" "At least 500. Maybe more." Talus looked sick. "We have maybe 200 loyal guards. The rest were Varen's people, and now they're either dead or imprisoned." Varen called them. Counselor Myron appeared beside them, her face grim. "Before you arrested him, he must have sent word to Lord Talvern, told him to bring his army. This was always the plan. Stage a coup, install Talvern's people in power, rule the kingdom together." "Then we fight," Draven said. "We'll lose." Marin's voice was flat. "They outnumber us 3-1. The keep isn't designed to hold against a siege this size. They'll break through within hours." Rhea watched the army advance, watched the gates she'd scrubbed, the courtyard she'd crossed 1,000 times, slowly fill with enemy soldiers. And she felt something shift inside her. The bond, pulsing not with fear or panic, but with power, raw and untapped and waiting. "There might be another way," she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "The bond," Rhea continued, True mate bonds are supposed to be powerful, right? Strong enough to change things? In theory, Marin said slowly, but that power is mostly metaphorical. Enhanced strength, sharper instincts, the ability to fight as a unit? No. Rhea met Draven's eyes. Not metaphorical, real. I felt it when you accepted the bond. It wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Like something opened up inside me. You're talking about channeling, Draven said. It's a legend. True mates supposedly can channel power through their bond, amplify each other's abilities. But no one's done it in generations. Because no one's had a true mate bond in generations, Rhea countered. You said it yourself, 1 in 10,000. When was the last time that happened in Frostreach? Draven was quiet. It's worth trying, Rhea pressed. What's the alternative? We fight a battle we can't win? We surrender and let Varen and Talvern take the kingdom? If channeling doesn't work, you could die, Marin said bluntly. Both of you. The stories say it either amplifies your power or burns you out from the inside. There's no middle ground. Then we burn, Rhea said. But at least we burn fighting. The Talvern army reached the keep's inner courtyard. Their commander, a massive man in scarred armor, raised his hand. The army stopped. King Draven, the commander shouted. We've come for Counselor Varen. Release him and surrender your throne, or we take the keep by force. Draven stepped forward. Rhea moved with him, their hands clasped tight. The bond thrummed between them, stronger now, pulling them together. Varen is a traitor and a murderer, Draven called back. He conspired with your lord to kill my mother. I have proof. Confession in his own hand. We don't recognize your authority to arrest him, release him, or face the consequences. No, Draven's voice rang out clear. We don't surrender, we don't bow, and we don't let murderers and conspirators take this kingdom. The commander smiled. Then you die. He raised his hand again. The army advanced. Rhea closed her eyes, focused on the bond, on that thrumming connection between her and Draven, that thread of power she'd felt when he accepted it. How do we do this? She whispered. I don't know, Draven admitted. But together. Whatever happens, we do it together. She felt him reach through the bond, felt his power, raw alpha strength, generations of warrior blood flow toward her. She reached back, offered everything she had. The bond flared white-hot between them. And something inside Rhea broke open. Power flooded through her, so much power she couldn't contain it. It poured out, spilled over, and where it touched the ground, the stone cracked. The air around them shimmered, heat and light, and something else. Something primal and old. The advancing army faltered, stopped. Rhea opened her eyes. The world looked different, sharper. Every detail crystal clear. She could see the fear in the soldiers' eyes, smell their sweat, hear their hearts racing. And she could feel Draven beside her, his power amplifying hers, creating something neither of them could have achieved alone. Last chance, she said, and her voice carried across the courtyard without her needing to shout. Leave now. Or don't leave at all. The commander laughed. You think a light show will stop? Rhea raised her hand. Power lanced out, struck the ground in front of the army. The stone exploded, sending up a shower of rock and dust. When it cleared, a crater 10 feet wide smoked where the courtyard had been. The laughter died. That was a warning, Rhea said. The next one won't be. The commander stared at the crater, at Rhea and Draven standing together, power crackling around them. At his own men, some of whom were already backing away. You're an Omega, he said, but his voice shook. Omegas don't have power. This one does, Draven said quietly, and you're standing in her kingdom. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from somewhere in the army's rear, a horn sounded. Once, twice, 3 times, the retreat signal. The commander's face went pale. No, we have orders. We're supposed to... Another horn blast cut him off. The army was already moving, backing toward the gates. Whoever was giving orders from the rear had decided the fight wasn't worth it. Rhea and Draven stood their ground, power still flowing between them, until the last soldier disappeared through the gates. Then Rhea's knees gave out. The power cut off instantly, leaving her gasping. Draven caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you, he murmured. Did we really just do that? Her voice came out weak, barely a whisper. We did. Draven held her close, and through the bond she felt his exhaustion matching hers. You did. Cheers erupted from the keep's defenders, the servants, the loyal guards, even some of the nobles who'd watched from the windows. They just witnessed an Omega and a King channel enough power to scare off an army 3 times their size. But Rhea barely heard them, because through the bond she felt something else. Someone else. Varen, locked in the dungeon, screaming in rage. And another presence, farther away. Lord Talvern, watching through his retreating army's eyes, already planning his next move. It's not over, she whispered. No, Draven agreed. But we bought time, and now everyone knows what we can do together. He helped her stand. The crowd pressed closer, questions flying, demands for explanation. Councillor Merrin appeared, shepherding them toward the keep. Council meeting, she said firmly. Now, while we have the advantage. We need to formalize charges against Varen, set his trial, and address the elephant currently standing in this courtyard. Which is? Draven asked. You just used forbidden power to defend the kingdom. With an Omega mate, most of the nobility considers an abomination. Merrin's voice was dry. We need to control the narrative before it controls us. They made their way to the council chambers. Rhea had never been inside before. Servants weren't allowed. The room was circular, with a raised dais in the center and seats arranged in a ring around it. 12 counselors, representing the major families and factions of Frostreach. Most of them looked terrified. We call this emergency session to order, Merrin announced. She placed the journal and letters from Varen's chambers on the central table. King Draven has brought charges of murder and treason against Councillor Varen. Evidence is presented for review. The counselors leaned in, began reading. Rhea watched their faces change, shock, horror, denial, rage, all the emotions cycling through in rapid succession. This is, one of them, an older man with white hair, looked up. If this is authentic, it's authentic, Draven said. Varen's handwriting, his seal, his chamber. He planned my mother's murder and executed it with Lord Talvern's help. Then he spent 20 years manipulating me to keep control of the kingdom. Even if we believe this, another counselor, a woman in expensive furs, spoke up. What happens now? You've accepted a bond with an Omega, shown forbidden power. The kingdom won't accept. The kingdom just watched that bond save us from an invading army, Merrin cut in. The kingdom watched an Omega nobody stand on a courtyard and make trained soldiers run away. I'd say the kingdom will accept whatever keeps them alive. It's unnatural, the woman insisted. Omegas don't have power. They can't. It goes against everything. Everything Varen taught us, Draven interrupted. Everything he wanted us to believe so he could maintain control. But the old records, the histories from before, true mate bonds were respected, feared, because of exactly what you just saw. We need to vote, the white-haired counselor said. On Varen's fate, on the legitimacy of the bond, on whether King Draven remains fit to rule. Fine. Draven's voice was steel. Vote, but understand this. The bond stays. Rhea stays. And anyone who tries to separate us will face exactly what that army faced, only slower. The threat hung in the air. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. All in favor of formally charging Councillor Varen with murder and treason? Merrin called. 7 hands went up, then 8, 9, finally all 12. Unanimous, Merrin said. The charges stand. Trial will be held publicly in 3 days. She paused. Now, the matter of the king's mate. This vote was harder. Rhea watched hands go up slowly, reluctantly. Some counselors whispered to each other. Others stared at her with barely concealed hostility. Finally, 8 votes in favor, 4 against. The bond is recognized, Merrin announced. Rhea Vance is acknowledged as the king's true mate, with all rights and protections that entails. The 4 who'd voted against stood as one. We cannot support this, the woman in furs said. We're leaving the council, effective immediately. They walked out. The door slammed behind them. Well, Merrin said into the silence, that could have gone worse. They'll spread dissent, one of the remaining counselors said. Rally others to their cause. Let them. Draven's jaw was set. We have proof of Varen's crimes. We have the strength of the bond. And we have the loyalty of everyone who values truth over tradition. You hope, the counselor muttered. The meeting dissolved after that. Counselors filed out, some supportive, others clearly conflicted. Rhea stood beside Draven, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "You need rest," he said quietly. "Both of us do. Using the bond like that, channeling that much power, it takes a toll." "What happens now?" "Now we prepare for Varen's trial, make our case, show the kingdom what he really is." Draven turned to face her fully, and we figure out how to survive what comes next. Because they both knew, through the bond, through simple logic, that this was only the beginning. Varen had allies. The Talvern family hadn't given up, and 4 counselors had just walked out, taking their influence with them. The kingdom was fracturing, and Rhea and Draven stood at the center of the crack, holding everything together through sheer force of will and a bond most people thought was an abomination. "Together," Rhea said. "Together," Draven agreed. They made their way to the royal chambers. Draven insisted Rhea wasn't going back to the servants' quarters. The bond pulled them close, neither able to stand being more than a few feet from the other. The connection was still new, still raw, and separation hurt in a way Rhea hadn't expected. The chambers were massive, easily 10 times the size of the closet Rhea had shared with Lena. A fireplace dominated one wall. Windows overlooked the courtyard where they'd just faced down an army. "Rest," Draven said. He moved to the door. "I'll have food brought up, and clothes. You can't keep wearing—" He gestured at her servant's dress, now torn and bloody and stained with dungeon filth. "Thank you." Rhea sank onto the bed. It was softer than anything she'd ever felt. "Draven?" He paused. "What if we can't control it? The power? What if next time it's too much? Then we burn together." He met her eyes. "Like you said, but at least we burn fighting." He left. Rhea lay back, stared at the ceiling, and tried to process everything that had happened in the past day. From interrupting the trials to nearly dying to channeling enough power to crack stone, the bond hummed in her chest, a constant presence. She could feel Draven even through walls, sense his location, his emotions. Right now he was talking to someone, Talus probably, coordinating guard rotations, planning security for Varen's trial. Always working, always carrying the weight of the kingdom. Rhea closed her eyes. Through the bond, she sent a feeling. Not words, just warmth. Support. She felt his surprise, then gratitude. Sleep pulled at her, but before she could drift off, the door burst open. Lena rushed in, threw herself at Rhea. "You're insane, completely insane, climbing out on a ledge like that, threatening to jump." "It worked, didn't it?" Rhea hugged her sister tight. "You could have died." Lena pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd lost you. When they dragged you up into that tower, I thought, I'm here, I'm fine." "You're bonded to the king. You just destroyed half a courtyard with magic. You're not fine, you're—" Lena laughed through her tears. "You're extraordinary." "I'm terrified," Rhea admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing. Any of this." "Neither does anyone else, but you're doing it anyway." Lena squeezed her hands. "What happens now?" "Now we survive. And we change things." Rhea thought about the counselors who'd walked out, about Varen's trial, about the army that would eventually come back. The kingdom can't keep going the way it was. Varen's gone, but his influence remains. We have to root it out. We. "You're my sister. You think I'm doing this alone?" Rhea managed a tired smile. "I'm going to need help. People I trust. And you're the only family I have left." Lena was quiet for a moment, then, "What do you need me to do?" "Watch. Listen. The servants see and hear everything the nobles think is beneath notice. I need to know who's loyal, who's plotting, who's waiting to make a move. You want me to spy. I want you to survive, and help me help others survive." Rhea's voice dropped. "This kingdom is about to tear itself apart. The only way to stop it is to know where the fractures are before they break." Lena nodded slowly. "I'll do it. But Rhea, be careful. The power you showed today, the bond, people are scared, and scared people do terrible things." "I know." After Lena left, Rhea finally let herself collapse. She slept hard and deep, the bond's presence a constant comfort even in unconsciousness. She woke to darkness and the sound of breaking glass. Rhea rolled off the bed before she was fully awake, hitting the floor hard. Glass shards scattered across the stone where she'd been sleeping seconds before. A crossbow bolt jutted from the pillow, still quivering. Through the bond, she felt Draven's alarm spike. He was running, already moving toward her. But he was too far away, 3 corridors and 2 staircases. Whoever had shot through the window had timed it for when he'd be gone. A figure dropped through the shattered window, landed in a crouch. Male, dressed in dark leather, face covered. He had another bolt already loaded. Rhea scrambled backward, grabbed the first thing her hand found, a metal candlestick from the bedside table. Heavy, solid, better than nothing. The assassin raised his crossbow. She threw the candlestick. It hit his arm, knocked his aim off. The bolt went wide, embedded in the wall. He dropped the crossbow, drew a knife instead, moved toward her with the kind of fluid grace that came from years of training. This wasn't some hired thug. This was a professional. "Nothing personal," he said. His voice was muffled behind the mask. "Just business." "Whose business?" Rhea backed toward the door, keeping furniture between them. "Does it matter? You're dead either way." He lunged. Rhea threw a chair at him. He knocked it aside like it weighed nothing, closed the distance. The knife flashed toward her throat. She dropped, rolled, came up near the fireplace. Her hand closed around the poker. She swung it hard, caught him across the ribs. He grunted, stumbled back. The door exploded inward. Draven burst through, sword drawn, eyes wild. The bond thrummed with his fury, hot and sharp enough to make Rhea's breath catch. The assassin saw him, calculated odds in a heartbeat, and ran for the window. Draven threw his sword. It spun end over end, caught the assassin in the shoulder. He fell, blood spreading across his dark leathers, but managed to roll out the window onto the narrow ledge outside. By the time Draven reached the window, the assassin was gone, vanished into the night like smoke. "Are you hurt?" Draven turned to Rhea, hands on her shoulders, scanning for wounds. "I'm fine. Shaken, but fine." She was still holding the poker, knuckles white around it. "He came through the window, knew exactly when you'd be gone." "Someone told him." Draven's jaw clenched. "Someone in the keep gave him your location and my schedule." "The 4 counselors who walked out?" "Maybe. Or someone else. Someone still hiding." He pulled her close, and she felt his fear through the bond, raw and overwhelming. "I should have stayed, should have posted guards." "You can't watch me every second." Rhea set down the poker. Her hands were shaking. "And guards can be bribed. We both know that." "Then what do we do?" "We figure out who sent him." She moved to where the assassin had fallen, knelt beside the pool of blood he'd left. "He was good. Too good to be a random hire. Someone with resources sent him." Draven examined his sword, still slick with blood. "Varen's remaining allies. Has to be. They want you dead before the trial." "Because I'm the one who saw his memories. The only witness who can testify to what really happened." Rhea's mind raced. "If I die, it's just your word against his. And plenty of people will believe he's being framed." Guards arrived, weapons drawn. Talus was with them, his face grim when he saw the broken window and blood. "Assassin," Draven said shortly. "Escaped. I want the entire keep searched. Every room, every corridor, every hiding spot. And I want to know how he got past the walls without anyone seeing him." "Your Majesty." Talus saluted. "What about the trial? It's tomorrow." "It goes forward. But we move it to the Great Hall instead of the council chamber. More space, more witnesses, harder for anyone to try something." Draven's voice was steel. "And double the guard, triple it. No one gets near Rhea except people I personally trust." The guards scattered to follow orders. Talus remained looking between Draven and Rhea. "With respect, Your Majesty, you look like you're about to start a war." "I am." Draven's eyes were cold. "Someone just tried to kill my mate in my own chambers. They declared war the moment that assassin came through the window. Then we'd better make sure we win it." Talus glanced at Rhea. "My lady, can you identify the assassin? Anything distinctive about him?" "Professional, well-trained. He moved like military, but not Frostreach military. Different style." Rhea tried to remember details through the adrenaline. "He said it was business. Nothing personal, like he was being paid. The question is by whom? Talus scratched his beard. Varen's locked up. He can't hire assassins from the dungeons. He doesn't need to hire them himself, Rhea said slowly. He just needs people loyal enough to act on his behalf. People who think killing me will restore the old order. Half the nobility, Draven muttered. Great. They spent the rest of the night fortifying the royal chambers and planning for the trial. Rhea tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. The bond pulsed with Draven's matching tension. Neither of them would rest easy until this was over. Dawn came gray and cold. Rhea dressed in clothes Draven had provided. Not servants' garments anymore, but proper clothing. A dress in deep blue, simple but well made. It felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. You look like you're going to a funeral, Lena said, slipping into the room with a tray of food. Your funeral, specifically. That's the plan, apparently. Rhea picked at the bread, not really hungry. Someone tried to kill me last night. Lena went pale. What? Assassin, through the window. Draven scared him off, but... Rhea set down the bread. The trial's today. If we don't make Varian's guilt stick, if we don't convince enough people, this happens again. And again. Until they succeed. Then you make it stick. Lena sat beside her. You show them what you showed Draven. Make them see the truth. I can't push memories through the bond to anyone except Draven. That's not how it works. Then you tell them, out loud, in detail. Make it so real they can't deny it. Lena grabbed her hands. You've never been afraid to speak up before. Don't start now. Rhea managed a weak smile. When did you get so brave? I learned from my sister. The great hall was packed by mid-morning. Nobles filled the front rows, dressed in their finest despite the grim occasion. Behind them, merchants and craftsmen and common folk, all crammed in to witness the trial of the century. Guards lined the walls, hands on weapons, eyes scanning for threats. Rhea sat beside Draven on a raised platform, trying not to fidget. The bond thrummed between them, his presence steadying her when her courage threatened to fail. Varen was brought and chained, flanked by 6 guards. He looked remarkably composed for a man on trial for his life. His silver hair was neat, his robes clean. He smiled at the crowd like he was greeting old friends. All rise for the king's justice, Counselor Marin announced. The crowd obeyed, the rustling of fabric loud in the sudden silence. We are here to determine the guilt or innocence of Counselor Varen, Draven said, his voice carrying through the hall. He stands accused of murdering Queen Alara Kale 20 years ago and of conspiracy to manipulate the throne for his own gain. Lies, Varen said calmly. All of it. Fabrications by a king corrupted by an Omega bond. The crowd murmured. Rhea felt their hostility like a physical weight. Half of them already believed Varen, already thought she was the real problem. We have evidence, Draven continued. He nodded to Marin, who produced the journal and letters. Correspondence between Varen and Lord Talvern planning the Queen's death, and Varen's own journal confessing to the murder in his own handwriting. Marin read excerpts aloud. The crowd listened, some shocked, others skeptical. When she finished, Varen laughed. A journal, he said. Anyone could write a journal and claim it was mine. The handwriting could be forged. The letters could be fabricated. You have no real proof. We have a witness, Draven said quietly. Someone who saw what happened through the bond, who experienced your confession directly. He looked at Rhea. She stood, legs shaking, and stepped forward. I saw his memories, she said. Her voice came out stronger than she'd expected. Through the bond, I saw Varen standing over the Queen's body, saw him manipulating Draven as a child, saw 20 years of lies and control. Convenient, Varen said. A vision through a bond that most scholars consider mythical at best, not evidence. Hallucination. Then explain the letters, Rhea shot back. Explain the journal. Explain why you were the only person with the Queen when she drank the poisoned wine. I was trying to save her. I heard her scream, ran to help. I was too late. Varen's voice was smooth, practiced. The real killers were the Talvern family. Everyone knows this. It's documented. Documented by you, Draven said. You controlled the investigation. You shaped the narrative. You made sure everyone believed the Talverns were responsible so no one would look at you. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air. Rhea felt the crowd's doubt. They wanted to believe Draven, wanted to believe her, but Varen was too skilled, too practiced at manipulation. She needed something more, something undeniable. The poison, she said suddenly. The poison that killed the queen. What was it? Varen blinked. I don't... You were there. You held her while she died. You must have seen the symptoms. What poison was used? Nightshade, most likely. It's common enough. No. Rhea stepped closer, the bond giving her confidence. Nightshade causes seizures, frothing, disorientation. The queen's symptoms were different, more controlled. She was lucid until the end, coherent enough to tell Draven to run, to warn him. She turned to the crowd. That's not nightshade. That's something rarer, something that takes knowledge to brew. And the only person in this hall with that knowledge is standing right there in chains. Varen's composure cracked slightly. I'm not an expert in poisons. Aren't you? Rhea pulled a piece of paper from her sleeve, notes she'd taken from the Keep's library last night while she couldn't sleep. The head librarian keeps records of who borrows which books. 20 years ago, someone borrowed every volume on toxins, poisons, and antidotes. That someone signed the ledger with your name. She handed the paper to Merrin, who read it and nodded. The books were never returned, Rhea continued. And when we searched Varen's chambers yesterday, we found them, hidden behind a false panel, with notes in the margins, recipes, including one for a poison that causes exactly the symptoms the queen displayed. The crowd's murmur grew louder, hostile now, but directed at Varen instead of her. That proves nothing, Varen said, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. I study many subjects. Poisons are part of understanding how to protect the king. From what? Himself? Rhea's voice rose. You poisoned the queen. You studied exactly how to do it so it would look like someone else's work. And then you spent 20 years making sure no one questioned it. You have no proof of that. I have your books, your notes, your journal, and I have the bond that showed me the truth. Rhea moved to stand directly in front of him. You're afraid, I can see it, because you know what's coming. The moment this crowd believes me, believes us, your power is gone, and you're just a murderer waiting for justice. Varen lunged at her. The chains caught him, guards pulling him back, but the mask had finally slipped. His face was twisted with rage. You ruined everything, he snarled. I built this kingdom. I made it strong. And you come along with your cursed bond and destroy decades of work. You built nothing, Draven said coldly. You murdered and manipulated and lied. That's not building. That's destroying from the inside. The crowd erupted. Shouts of anger, demands for justice, some calling for immediate execution. The guards struggled to maintain order. Merrin banged her staff on the floor. Silence! We will have order! It took several minutes for the hall to quiet. When it did, Merrin looked at the assembled counselors. We've heard the evidence. We've heard the confession. It's time to vote. All in favor of finding Counselor Varen guilty of murder and treason? Every hand went up. Even the nobles who'd looked skeptical earlier raised their hands, swayed by Varen's outburst. Unanimous, Merrin declared. Counselor Varen, you are found guilty of the murder of Queen Alara Kyle and conspiracy against the crown. The sentence is death. The crowd roared approval. Varen sagged in his chains, all his composure gone. I want to know who hired the assassin last night, Draven said, his voice cutting through the noise. I want names, and I want them now. Varen looked up, managed a bitter smile. You think I'm the only one? There are a dozen others waiting to take my place. You've won this battle, boy, but the war isn't over. Then give me their names and save yourself some pain. No. Varen's eyes were hard. I'll die before I betray them. At least I'll die knowing I tried to save this kingdom from weakness. Take him back to the dungeons, Draven ordered. Execution is set for dawn tomorrow. The guards dragged Varen out. He didn't resist, just kept that bitter smile on his face like he knew something they didn't. The crowd began to disperse, nobles talking in hushed clusters. Rhea caught snippets of conversation, some supportive, others still doubtful. But the tide had turned. The proof had been enough. You did well, Draven said quietly, taking her hand. Better than well. You destroyed him. We destroyed him, Rhea corrected. Together. A commotion near the hall's entrance made them both turn. A group of people pushed through, led by a woman in servant's clothing. Lena. "Your Majesty," Lena called. "I found something." She reached the platform, breathing hard. Behind her, 3 other servants, all women Rhea recognized from the kitchens. "What is it?" Draven asked. "After the trial started, I did what Rhea asked, watched, listened." Lena glanced at her sister. These 3 overheard a conversation in the noble's wing. Lord Corvin, the one who took hostages in the tower, he was talking to someone about the assassination attempt. One of the other servants stepped forward. "I heard him say the Omega should be dead by now." And the person he was talking to agreed, said they'd send another assassin if the first one failed. "Who was he talking to?" Draven's voice was dangerous. "Lady Mira, the one who voted against the bond. She was one of the 4 who walked out of the council." Draven looked at Talus. "Arrest her." "And Lord Corvin. Conspiracy to commit murder." "Already arrested, Your Majesty," Talus said with satisfaction. "We picked them up during the trial. They're in the dungeons now." "Good." Draven turned back to Lena and the other servants. "You did the kingdom a service today, all of you. You'll be rewarded." Lena shook her head. "We don't want rewards. We want change. The kind of change where servants matter, where we're not invisible." "You have my word," Draven said. "Things are going to be different." After the servants left, after the hall finally emptied, Rhea and Draven stood alone on the platform. "It's not over," Rhea said quietly. "Varen was right about that. There are others. People who think like he did, who want the old ways back." "I know." Draven was quiet for a moment. "But we made a statement today. Showed them we're not backing down. That the bond isn't weakness, it's strength. Some of them will never believe that. Then they can leave, or they can adapt." His voice hardened. "But I'm done letting fear control this kingdom. Done letting murderers and manipulators run things from the shadows." Rhea felt his determination through the bond, fierce and unwavering, but underneath it, exhaustion. The past days had taken their toll on both of them. "We should rest," she said, "before tomorrow." "Tomorrow." Draven's expression darkened. "Varen's execution. The kingdom will watch. They'll see what happens to traitors. Will they see justice? Or will they see a king killing his enemies? Does it matter? Either way, he dies." "It matters." Rhea turned to face him fully. "If we're going to change things, if we're going to be different than what came before, we can't just be strong. We have to be right." Draven looked at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "You're right. We do this properly, publicly, by law. No secret executions, no midnight assassinations. We show the kingdom that justice applies to everyone, even the powerful." They walked back to the royal chambers together, guards flanking them. The keep felt different now, less hostile but still tense, like everyone was waiting to see what happened next. Rhea spent the evening with Lena, who'd been given quarters near the royal chambers. They talked about everything and nothing, childhood memories, the changes coming, what the future might hold. "You're different," Lena said at one point, "stronger, more sure of yourself." "I'm terrified every second," Rhea admitted, "but I'm terrified with purpose now. That helps." "The bond?" "Partly. But also," Rhea struggled to find words, "I spent my whole life invisible, being nobody. And now people see me. They might hate me, might want me dead, but they see me. That means something. It means you matter." Lena squeezed her hand. "You always mattered, but now everyone knows it." That night, Rhea slept better than she had since the trials. The bond wrapped around her like a blanket. Draven's presence constant even when he wasn't physically there. Guards stood outside the door, weapons ready. Windows were barred, every precaution taken. She woke to dawn light and the sound of drums. Execution day. The courtyard was packed again. The entire keep had turned out to witness Varen's death. Rhea stood beside Draven on the platform, her hand in his. The bond thrummed steadily between them. Varen was brought out in chains. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his power, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. "Any last words?" Draven asked formally. "Just one piece of advice," Varen said. "Enjoy your victory, boy." It won't last. The kingdom will tear itself apart, and when it does, you'll wish you'd listened to me. I'll take my chances." The executioner stepped forward. Varen knelt, placed his head on the block. The crowd went silent. Rhea watched, forcing herself not to look away. This was justice. This was necessary. But it still felt wrong somehow, ending a life even when that life had caused so much death. Through the bond, she felt Draven's conflict. He wanted this, needed this, but it cost him something to order it. The executioner raised his axe. "Wait!" Rhea's voice rang out before she'd consciously decided to speak. Everyone turned to look at her. Draven's confusion flowed through the bond. "Before he dies," Rhea said slowly, "I want to know who else is involved. Who else supported his conspiracy? Who sent the assassin?" "I already told you," Varen said. "I won't betray them." "Then you die protecting people who would have abandoned you the moment you became inconvenient." Rhea moved closer to the block. "Is that really how you want to be remembered? As a fool who gave his life for allies who didn't deserve it?" Varen's eyes narrowed. "What are you offering?" "Nothing. Your death is certain, but you can choose how it's remembered. As a traitor who died silent and bitter, or as someone who finally did one honest thing and exposed the rot he helped create." The crowd murmured. Draven tensed beside her, but through the bond she felt his understanding. This was a gamble, but it might work. Varen was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, bitter and broken. "You're clever, I'll give you that." He shifted on his knees, looked up at the gray sky. "Fine. You want names? Lord Halon, Lady Sarah, Counselor Trent. All of them knew. All of them benefited. And all of them will smile at your wedding and plot your death the moment your back is turned. Anyone else? Dozens. But those three are the leaders, the ones with real power." Varen smiled. "Good luck rooting them out. They're better at hiding than I ever was." He lowered his head back to the block. "Get it over with." The executioner looked at Draven, who nodded once. The axe fell. Varen's head rolled free. Blood spread across the stone. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others silent, all of them processing what they'd just witnessed. Rhea felt sick, but also relieved. It was done. The man who'd murdered the queen, who'd manipulated a kingdom for 20 years, was dead. "Arrest Lord Halon, Lady Sarah, and Counselor Trent," Draven ordered. His voice was steady, but through the bond Rhea felt his exhaustion. "Bring them in for questioning." Guards moved immediately. The crowd began to disperse, talking excitedly about the execution and the new arrests. Rhea and Draven walked back inside the keep. Neither spoke until they reached the royal chambers and the door closed behind them. "That was risky," Draven said finally. "Getting him to talk like that. It worked. This time. But now we have 3 more conspirators to deal with. More trials, more executions, more chances for things to go wrong. Or more chances to clean out the rot." Rhea sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. "We can't just kill Varen and pretend everything's fixed. We have to follow every thread until the web collapses. Could take months, years. Then it takes years." She looked up at him. "What's the alternative? Ignore it and hope they don't come for us in the night?" Draven sat beside her. Through the bond, she felt his agreement even before he spoke. "You're right. We do this properly. All of it." He took her hand. "But we do it together." "Together," she agreed. Over the next 3 days, they interrogated the arrested conspirators. Lord Halon broke first, confessing to funding assassins and plotting to overthrow Draven. Lady Sarah held out longer, but eventually admitted to similar crimes. Counselor Trent maintained his innocence until they found letters in his chambers proving he'd been working with Varen for years. All 3 were tried publicly. All 3 were found guilty. All 3 were executed. The kingdom watched each trial, each execution, and slowly the mood began to shift. The nobles who'd supported Varen started to publicly distance themselves. The ones who'd been neutral began to speak up in support of Draven. And the common folk, the servants and craftsmen and farmers, they started to hope. Hope that maybe things really were changing, that maybe an Omega bonded to a king wasn't the end of the world, that maybe strength could mean something different than what they'd always known. 2 weeks after Varen's execution, Counselor Marin called an emergency council meeting. We have a problem, she announced, or perhaps an opportunity depending on how you look at it. What is it? Draven asked. Lord Talvern has sent an envoy. They want to negotiate, to discuss terms of peace and possibly an alliance. Silence fell over the council chamber. They attacked us, Draven said flatly, sent an army to our gates. And now they want peace? They want to avoid more conflict. The display of power you and Rhea showed scared them. They realize they can't win a direct confrontation. Marin's voice was dry. So they're trying diplomacy instead. It's a trap, one of the other counselors said. Maybe, maybe not. Marin looked at Draven. Either way, we need to respond. Ignoring them makes us look weak. Attacking them starts a war we may not win, but negotiating gives us time to prepare, Rhea finished. Time to strengthen defenses, secure allies, root out any remaining conspirators. Exactly. Draven looked at Rhea. Through the bond, she felt his question before he spoke it aloud. What do you think? I think we meet with them, hear what they have to say. We don't commit to anything, but we listen. Rhea's voice was steady. And while they're talking, we watch. See who they're really working with, what they really want. Use their own tactic against them. Draven was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Send word to the envoy. We'll meet. But on our terms. In our keep. With our guards. Agreed, Marin said. I'll arrange it. The meeting was set for 3 days later. In the meantime, Rhea threw herself into learning everything she could about the Talvern family, their holdings, their weaknesses. Lena helped, gathering information from servants who'd worked in Talvern territory. Slowly, a picture emerged. The Talverns were powerful but overextended. They'd spent too much on the failed invasion, borrowed too heavily from other families. They needed peace as much as Frostreach did, maybe more. That's our leverage, Rhea said to Draven the night before the meeting. They're desperate. They need this negotiation to succeed or their whole family collapses. So we push hard, make demands. We push smart, get what we need without backing them into a corner. Rhea looked at the maps spread across the desk. We're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to neutralize them as a threat. When did you become a strategist? When I had to survive in a keep full of people who wanted me dead. She managed a tired smile. You learn to think ahead when your life depends on it. The Talvern envoy arrived exactly on time, a tall woman in elegant furs flanked by 2 guards. She introduced herself as Lady Era Talvern, the family's head diplomat. King Draven, Lady Rhea. She bowed slightly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Let's skip the pleasantries, Draven said. You sent an army to my gates, threatened my people. Why should I negotiate with you instead of preparing for war? Lady Era didn't flinch. Because war would cost both our families dearly. And because what happened with Varen, the conspiracy, the assassination attempts, that wasn't sanctioned by my family. Varen acted alone, using our name without permission. Convenient excuse, Rhea said. We have letters proving your family worked with him. Letters my uncle wrote without family approval. He's been removed from his position, permanently. Lady Era's voice was cold. The current family leadership had no knowledge of his schemes, and we're prepared to prove our good faith. How? Draven asked. We're offering a trade alliance, open borders for merchants, reduced tariffs, and information. We'll share everything we know about other families who might be plotting against you. Rhea and Draven exchanged glances. Through the bond, they communicated silently, weighing options. What do you want in return? Rhea asked. Recognition. Acknowledgement that the Talvern family was not responsible for the conspiracy. And protection. If we're seen as your allies, other families won't dare move against us. You want us to save you from your own mess, Draven said bluntly. Yes. Lady Era met his eyes. Is that so different from what you're doing, cleaning up Varen's mess? Fair point. They negotiated for 3 hours. Back and forth, demands and counter-demands, until finally they reached terms both sides could accept. The Talverns would provide intelligence and trade. Frostreach would publicly acknowledge they'd been deceived by Varen, not willing conspirators. One more thing, Rhea said as Lady Era prepared to leave. We want access to your uncle's papers. Everything he wrote, everyone he communicated with. If there are more conspirators hiding in other families, we need to know. Lady Era hesitated. That's extensive. It could implicate dozens of nobles. Good. Let them be implicated. Let them know we're watching. Rhea's voice was steel. The old way of doing things is over. Either the nobility adapts or they fall. Your family gets to choose which side of that line you stand on. Very well. Lady Era nodded slowly. You'll have the papers within a week. After she left, Draven turned to Rhea. You handled that like you've been negotiating treaties your whole life. I've been negotiating survival my whole life. This isn't that different. They walked to the window, looked out over the courtyard where Varen had died, where they'd faced down an army together, where everything had changed. Do you think it's working? Draven asked quietly. The changes, the trials, everything we're trying to do. I think it's too soon to tell. Rhea leaned against him, feeling his warmth through the bond. But people are talking. They're questioning things they never questioned before. Servants are speaking up. Some nobles are adapting. That's something. It's not enough. Not yet. But it's a start. She looked up at him. We've survived attempted assassinations, a trial, executions, and diplomatic negotiations, all in 3 weeks. I'd say we're doing pretty well for two people who never wanted this bond in the first place. Draven laughed, short but genuine. When you put it that way. That night, Rhea stood before the council and formally presented the Talvern agreement. Most councillors approved. A few grumbled, but didn't openly object. The motion passed. Afterward, Meryn pulled her aside. You're good at this, the older woman said. Better than I expected. You think like a strategist, speak like a diplomat, but you haven't lost touch with where you came from. That's rare. I'm just trying to survive. No, you're trying to change things. There's a difference. Meryn's expression was thoughtful. The king needs that. Needs someone who sees the world differently than he does, who challenges him to be better. He is better. He just spent 20 years being told he wasn't. And now he has you telling him different. Hold on to that, both of you. Meryn's voice dropped. The fight isn't over. There are still nobles who want the old ways back. Still people who think Omegas are less than human. But you're making progress. Don't let them intimidate you into stopping. I won't. And she meant it. Looking back over the past weeks, the terror and pain and desperate struggles, Rhea realized something fundamental had shifted inside her. She wasn't the invisible servant anymore. Wasn't the girl who kept her head down and hoped to survive. She was the king's mate, the Omega who'd faced down an army, the woman who'd exposed a conspiracy and helped reshape a kingdom. She was Rhea Vance, and she mattered. The bond pulsed warmly, Draven's pride flowing through it. He was in a meeting with commanders, planning defense strategies, but he'd felt her realization through the connection, felt her strength, and he was proud. The rebellion came 2 months later, when winter finally loosened its grip on Frostreach. It started small, a group of nobles refusing to pay taxes, merchants closing their shops in protest, warriors deserting their posts, all of them claiming the same thing: they wouldn't serve a king corrupted by an Omega bond. How many? Draven asked Talus, scanning the reports. 50 warriors deserted. Maybe 100 nobles are withholding taxes. And the merchants? Talus grimaced. Half the market district is shut down. They're coordinated, Rhea said, reading over Draven's shoulder. This isn't spontaneous. Someone's organizing them. The question is who? Draven set down the papers. Varen's dead. His main allies are executed. Who's left with enough influence to pull this off? The answer came 3 days later when a formal declaration arrived at the keep, sealed with the mark of the Northern Houses, a coalition of noble families who controlled the mountain passes and timber trade. We, the Northern Houses, hereby declare our independence from the corrupted throne of Frostreach, Draven read aloud to the assembled council. We will not serve a king who has violated sacred tradition by accepting a bond with an Omega. We will not submit to the perversion of natural order. We demand King Draven either renounce the bond and exile the Omega, or abdicate the throne to a more suitable ruler. Silence crashed through the council chamber. They're calling for civil war, Meryn said quietly. They're calling for my death, Rhea corrected. Let's not pretend otherwise. Either way, we need to respond. Draven looked at his remaining counselors, 7 now, after the executions and desertions. Suggestions? March north, one counselor said immediately. Put down the rebellion by force before it spreads. That's exactly what they want, another argued. They want us to look like tyrants crushing dissent. It'll turn more people against us. Then what? Negotiate? Give them what they want? We can't give them what they want, Rhea said firmly. They want me gone and the bond severed. That's not happening. Then we find a third option. Draven's voice was steel. Something that shows strength without brutality. Something that proves the bond isn't weakness. With respect, Your Majesty, you've already proven that, Merrin said. You scared off an army, exposed conspiracies, executed traitors. What more proof do they need? They need to see it themselves, not just hear about it. Rhea's mind was racing. They need to witness what the bond can actually do, not as a weapon, as something else. What are you thinking? Draven asked through the bond. She turned to face the council. The northern houses control the mountain passes, right? The ones that lead to the iron mines and timber forests? Yes. Why? Because winter's ending, spring floods are coming, and every year those passes flood, cutting off trade for months. People starve, the economy tanks. Rhea looked at Draven. What if we stop the floods? That's impossible, a counselor scoffed. The floods are natural. You can't just... We channeled enough power to crack stone and scare off 500 soldiers, Rhea interrupted. We can redirect water. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some thought it was brilliant. Others thought it was suicide. All of them agreed it was insane. Even if you could do it, Merrin said, raising her voice over the chaos, even if the bond's power is strong enough, the northern houses have thousands of people. If they attack while you're channeling, then they attack, Draven said. But we go anyway. We show them what the bond means. Not destruction, creation, protection. They'll call it a trick. Let them. Rhea's voice was hard. We're going. They left 2 days later with an escort of 50 loyal warriors. The journey north took a week through terrain that grew progressively more hostile. Snow still clung to the high peaks. The wind cut like knives. The northern houses had fortified their position. Rhea could see their banners flying from keeps carved into the mountainside, warriors patrolling the passes. Thousands of them, just like Merrin, had warned. This is suicide, Talus muttered, scanning the enemy positions. Probably, Draven agreed, but we're doing it anyway. They made camp at the base of the main pass, where the spring melt was already starting. Water rushed down the mountain in torrents, carving new channels, threatening to overflow the old ones. In 2 weeks, maybe less, it would become impassable. Rhea stood at the water's edge, feeling its power through the bond, cold and relentless, flowing with the kind of force that had shaped mountains over centuries. Can we really do this? She asked Draven quietly. I don't know, but we're about to find out. A horn blast echoed from the mountains above. Warriors poured out of the northern houses' keeps, forming battle lines across the pass. Hundreds of them, weapons gleaming in the weak sunlight. A rider broke from their ranks, approached under a white flag. An older man with a scarred face and cold eyes. King Draven, he called. I am Lord Garrett of House Winterspire. We demand you turn back. This is northern territory now. You have no authority here. This is Frostreach territory, Draven called back. And I'm here to prevent the spring floods that kill your people every year. We don't need your help. We need you gone. Then watch. Draven turned to Rhea. Ready? She nodded, trying to ignore the army watching from above, trying to ignore the very real possibility that this would fail and they'd both die looking like fools. They clasped hands. The bond flared between them, hot and immediate. Rhea felt Draven's power flow toward her, felt her own rise to meet it. The connection strengthened, amplified, became something greater than either of them alone. She reached out with that combined power, feeling for the water. It resisted at first, wild and chaotic, following paths worn deep over generations. But she pushed harder, Draven's strength supporting her, and slowly the water began to respond. It shifted course, moved away from the old channels that would overflow and flood, found new paths, deeper and more stable, that could handle the spring melt without destroying everything in their path. The bond burned. Power poured through her in waves that left her gasping, But she held on, guided the water, shaped it like clay under her hands. Draven anchored her, kept her from being swept away by the current, his presence steady and solid through the connection. The water obeyed. New channels formed, carved by power instead of time. The overflow that would have flooded villages and destroyed crops flowed safely into reinforced passages that led down to the valley without causing damage. It took hours. By the time Rhea finally released the power, the sun was setting and she could barely stand. Draven caught her, held her up, both of them shaking with exhaustion. But behind them, the water flowed clean and controlled. The flood that came every spring, that killed people and destroyed livelihoods, was contained. Silence from the army above. Then, slowly, Lord Garrett dismounted, walked down to where they stood. "You actually did it," he said, and his voice held something like wonder. "You stopped the floods." "We did," Rhea managed. Her voice was raw. "And we can do it again next spring, and the spring after that, for as long as you need." "Why?" Lord Garrett looked genuinely confused. "Why would you help us when we declared against you?" "Because you're still part of this kingdom," Draven said. "And a king protects his people, all of them, even the ones who hate him." Lord Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt. One knee, head bowed, in a gesture of submission. "House Winterspire withdraws from the rebellion," he said clearly. "We recognize King Draven and his mate as rightful rulers." Behind him, other Northern House lords dismounted, knelt. One by one, they submitted, their voices carrying across the pass. House Iron Peak submits. House Coldwater submits. House Thornridge submits. By the time full dark fell, every Northern house had knelt. The rebellion was over. They stayed 3 more days, helping to stabilize the new channels, teaching the Northern engineers how to maintain them. Rhea worked alongside common laborers, getting her hands dirty, showing them exactly how the water should flow. "You don't have to do this," one of the engineers said, clearly uncomfortable with royalty doing manual labor. "We can handle it." "I know you can, but I'm helping anyway." Rhea drove another support beam into place. "That's what mates do. We help." Word spread fast. By the time they returned to Frostreach Keep, the entire kingdom knew what had happened. How the Omega and the King had stopped the northern floods. How they'd turned rebels into allies without bloodshed. The market district reopened. The merchants who'd closed their shops came back, grumbling but compliant. The warriors who'd deserted returned, asking for a second chance. And slowly, grudgingly, the kingdom began to accept what it had fought so hard against. The bond wasn't weakness, it was power. Real power, the kind that built instead of destroyed. 3 months after the Northern Rebellion ended, Councillor Marin called another emergency meeting. "We have a visitor," she announced. "Lord Talvern himself. He's asking for an audience." Draven and Rhea exchanged glances. Lord Talvern hadn't shown his face since the failed invasion, content to let his niece handle negotiations. "What does he want?" Draven asked. "To see the Omega who scared off his army." Marin's voice was dry. "His words, not mine." They met in the Great Hall with the full council present. Lord Talvern was older than Rhea expected, 70 at least, with white hair and hands that shook slightly. But his eyes were sharp, calculating. "King Draven, Lady Rhea." He bowed, the gesture stiff but genuine. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "You tried to take my kingdom by force," Draven said bluntly. "Why should I meet with you at all?" "Because I was wrong." The words came out hard, like they physically hurt. "I believed Varen's lies. Thought the bond had corrupted you, made you weak. But the northern floods..." He shook his head. "What you did up there, that wasn't corruption. That was strength of a kind I've never seen." "And?" Rhea prompted. "And I'm here to formally apologize. To acknowledge that House Talvern acted against the crown based on false information, and to offer reparations." He gestured to servants who brought forward chests. "Gold, supplies, whatever you need to repair the damage we caused." "We don't want your gold," Draven said. "Then what do you want?" Rhea stepped forward. "We want you to acknowledge the bond publicly. To tell every noble family in the kingdom that what you saw was real. That true mate bonds aren't weakness or corruption. That they're exactly what they've always been. Powerful, necessary, and worth protecting. Lord Talvern was quiet. Then, slowly, he nodded. I'll do it. I'll make the declaration at the next kingdom gathering. Every family will hear it. He looked directly at Rhea. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the invasion, for the lies, for not seeing the truth sooner. Apologies don't bring back the dead, Rhea said. But they're a start. Mikko. After he left, Draven pulled Rhea aside. That was more than I expected, he admitted. He's scared. The northern houses submitted. The Talverns are isolated. He needs allies more than he needs pride. Rhea's voice was pragmatic. But scared people who admit they're wrong can become loyal people. If we give them the chance. Always the strategist. Always the survivor. She smiled. Same thing, really. The kingdom gathering happened a month later. Every major family sent representatives. The Great Hall was packed beyond capacity, nobles standing shoulder to shoulder, all of them waiting to see what would happen. Lord Talvern stood before them and kept his word. He told the story of the invasion, the failure, the northern floods, told them what he'd seen, an Omega and a king channeling power that had reshaped geography itself. I came here believing bonds were weakness, he finished. I was wrong. What King Draven and his mate have is stronger than anything I've seen in 50 years of politics and war. And any family that continues to oppose them isn't being traditional, they're being foolish. The hall erupted. Some nobles cheered, others protested. All of them argued, but the tide had turned. Rhea could feel it. The opposition was crumbling, replaced by something new. Not universal acceptance. That would take generations. But acknowledgement. Recognition that the world was changing whether they liked it or not. Draven stood to address the crowd. The bond stays. Rhea stays. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. His voice carried through the hall. But I'll also say this. We're not asking you to love us. We're not asking you to agree with everything we do. We're asking you to give us a chance, to see what we can build together, to be part of something new instead of clinging to something broken. And if we refuse, someone called from the back, then you refuse. But you do it knowing what you're giving up, knowing that while you're fighting change, we're making the kingdom stronger, safer, better. Draven's hand found Rhea's. Your choice, but choose knowing what's at stake. The gathering lasted 3 days. Debates, negotiations, compromises hammered out in late-night sessions. By the end, most families had formally acknowledged the bond. Some remained opposed, but they were a minority now, outnumbered and outmaneuvered. On the final night, Rhea stood on the keep's ramparts, looking out over the city. Lights flickered in windows, smoke rose from chimneys, life continuing despite everything that had changed. You did it, Lena said, joining her. You actually changed things. We're not done. There's still resistance, still people who want the old ways back. But you're winning. That's what matters. Lena leaned against the stone wall. I never thought I'd see the day when a servant girl became queen. I'm not queen, just the king's mate. Same difference to everyone else. Lena's voice was soft. You know they're talking about making it official. Formal coronation, the whole ceremony. That's... Rhea didn't know how to finish that sentence. The thought of actually being crowned, of officially becoming royalty, still felt surreal. Terrifying, Lena supplied. Yeah, but you faced worse. You'll figure it out. Footsteps on the ramparts made them turn. Draven approached, looking tired but content. The last delegation just left, he said. It's done. The gathering's over. How bad was the final count? Rhea asked. 70% in support, 20% neutral, 10% opposed. He moved to stand beside her. Better than I expected. The 10% will cause problems. Let them. We've handled worse. And through the bond, she felt his confidence, his certainty that they could face whatever came next. Besides, we've got something they don't. What's that? Each other. He took her hand, and that's proven to be worth more than armies. The coronation happened 6 months later, when the kingdom had finally stabilized. They held it in the same great hall where Rhea had interrupted the mating trials, where Varen had been tried, where everything had changed. She wore white, not the traditional coronation robes, but a dress that reflected where she'd come from. Simple, elegant, with embroidery done by the servants who'd known her before any of this started. "You look terrified, Ma," Draven murmured as they waited for the ceremony to begin. "I am terrified. What if I mess it up?" "Then you mess it up, and we figure it out, like we always do." He squeezed her hand. Together. The ceremony was shorter than tradition dictated. Draven refused to make Rhea sit through hours of speeches and ritual. They kept the important parts, the crown, the vows, the formal recognition, and scrapped the rest. When Counselor Marin placed the crown on Rhea's head, the weight of it nearly made her stumble. But Draven steadied her, his presence solid through the bond. "Queen Rhea Vance," Marin announced, "mate to King Draven Kale, recognized by the crown and the people as rightful ruler of Frostreach." The hall erupted in cheers. Not everyone cheered. Some nobles stayed silent, faces carefully neutral. But enough people celebrated that the opposition didn't matter. Rhea looked out over the crowd, saw Lena crying happy tears, saw the servants who'd worked beside her, now watching her wear a crown. Saw warriors and nobles and common folk, all of them witnessing a servant girl become a queen. It shouldn't have been possible. By every rule of the Old Kingdom, by every tradition and law, she should have died in that throne room the day she interrupted the trials. But she hadn't. She'd survived, fought, changed things from the inside out, and now she wore a crown. The celebration lasted into the night. Music and food and dancing, the kind of revelry Frostreach hadn't seen in decades. Rhea made herself circulate, talking to nobles and commoners alike, trying to bridge the gap between who she'd been and who she'd become. "How does it feel?" an older noblewoman asked, one of the few who'd supported the bond from the beginning. "Being queen?" "Strange," Rhea admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me it's a mistake, that I don't belong here." "But you do belong here. You proved that." The noblewoman's voice was firm. "You took a kingdom tearing itself apart and helped put it back together. That's what queens do." Later, much later, when the celebration finally wound down and the guests departed, Rhea and Draven stood alone in the royal chambers. "Think we can actually do this?" Rhea asked, removing the crown carefully. It still felt too heavy, too important. "We've done everything else." Draven pulled her close. "Survived assassination attempts, put down a rebellion, stopped floods, negotiated peace. Being king and queen is almost easy compared to that." "Almost. Almost," he agreed. Through the bond, she felt his exhaustion, his relief, his hope for the future. All of it tangled together, impossible to separate into individual emotions. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we build. We take everything we fought for, and we make it real, change laws, shift traditions, create something new." His voice was steady. "It won't be easy. The opposition will fight us every step, but we'll handle it. Together. Together." They stood like that for a long time, the bond humming between them. Outside, the city slept. Inside, two people who'd never wanted any of this, the power, the responsibility, the weight of a kingdom, held each other and tried to believe they could actually pull it off. In the months that followed, they proved they could. Laws changed. Servants gained rights they'd never had. Omegas were recognized as equals under the law. The old traditions that had kept people in place, kept them invisible, slowly eroded under steady pressure. It wasn't smooth. There were protests, small uprisings, nobles who refused to adapt. But Rhea and Draven faced each challenge with the same strategy that had worked from the beginning, strength tempered with compassion. Power used to build instead of destroy. The bond between them grew stronger, not just the connection, but the partnership. They learned to work as a unit, anticipating each other's moves, covering each other's weaknesses. Where Draven was blunt, Rhea was diplomatic. Where she was cautious, he was bold. Together, they balanced, and the kingdom noticed. Slowly, grudgingly, even the harshest critics began to admit that maybe, just maybe, the bond wasn't the disaster they'd predicted. Maybe it was exactly what Frostreach needed. A year after the coronation, Rhea stood in the servants' quarters, renovated now, with better heating and larger rooms, talking to the women who'd worked beside her. "Things are different," one of them said. "Better. We have a voice now. People listen." "Keep using it," Rhea said. "Don't let anyone make you invisible again." "We won't." The woman smiled. You taught us that. Showed us that even a nobody can matter if they're brave enough to speak up. You were never nobodies. The kingdom just needed better eyes. She left the quarters and found Draven waiting in the corridor. How are they? He asked. Good. Hopeful. She took his hand. It's working, Draven. What we're building, it's actually working. For now, there's still work to do. There's always work to do, but we're doing it. She leaned against him, feeling his warmth through the bond. And that's enough. They walked through the keep together, king and queen, Omega and Alpha, two people bound by fate who'd turned that bond into something the kingdom couldn't ignore. Behind them, servants moved through halls they'd once cleaned in silence, now talking freely. Nobles who'd once dismissed Omegas now negotiated with them as equals. Warriors who'd deserted returned, pledging loyalty to a kingdom that valued strength but didn't worship it. The old Frostreach, the one built on fear and tradition and the absolute power of alpha bloodlines, was dying. The new Frostreach, built on bonds and partnerships and the courage to stand up even when the odds were impossible, was being born. And at the center of it all stood Rhea, the servant girl who dared to defy a king and ended up changing everything. She wore a crown now, bore the weight of a kingdom, carried responsibilities she'd never imagined. But she also had something she'd never had before, a voice that mattered, a place that was truly hers, and a partner who'd stand beside her through whatever came next. Together, they'd turned a bond born in defiance into the foundation of a new world. And that was worth every terrifying, impossible step it had taken to get there.